Okay, I put the audio to 50%. Let me move this over.
These parts are safe for sure.
Okay, what am I streaming at? Oh, night, okay. Hold on, what am I using to stream?
I don't get it.
I think we're doing CPU encoding. Hold on, let's yeah.
A shield is not enough to protect the most important things. That's why I must also wield a spear.
No, that's not what I want to do.
One with a life such as this, I will be content.
We should be live. Okay, so we're live. Have to fix the settings here. I don't know why it's
Why isn't it working? I don't get it. These parts are safe for sure.
I'll just put that in as the game. Hold on.
Why isn't it working? I don't get it.
Trying to find the, there it is. We'll just go with that.
Why isn't it working? I don't get it. These parts are safe for sure.
Where is it? There, we'll just go with that. File's too big. Alright, wonderful.
I will always seek to protect the things that are most important, no matter what it takes,
Hold on, let me...
even when it looks futile.
Okay. Why is it so big?
These parts are safe for sure. Why isn't it working? I don't get it.
Too big. Okay, never mind.
Peace and good health should be enjoyed by all. If I can provide everyone with a life such as this, I will be content.
Move this over. I'll have to probably move this around.
I don't get it.
And wait, are we on low latency? Okay.
These parts are safe for sure.
Okay, so let's see how this goes. So in this stream, we're gonna be talking about me. I don't need to have playback. Man, with 32 threads is pretty good.
Add Astra.
It's pretty good for live streaming, I would say. Very good, actually. Okay, the main thing that I wanted to talk about on this stream, and this stream might not be that long, but we're gonna be going over what, like, sort of what is gonna be talked about tomorrow from AMD. Because tomorrow is gonna be the announcement for RDNA 3. So when we look at all the different products that were announced over the last several weeks, let me bring back up Paint. Where is that? Okay, so we had a lot of things, like Paul from Paul's Hardware was talking about in one of his videos. Why is this so small, like 36 size? Okay, so we had a lot of product launches. AMD Ryzen 7000, AM5, or that was like what? September? Was it September? Yeah, it was September 27th. Let's just do this. So we had 9 on 9/27. We had AMD Ryzen 7000. Then what was the next big product launch? We had October 12. We had two things. We had Nvidia RTX 4090 and Intel Arc A770 and A750. So why those two went on the same day, I don't understand why they did that, but that's kind of like a thing that happened. Then we had, what was it, like, October 20th? We had Intel 13th Gen.
I will always seek to protect the
Intel
things
Core
that are
13th
most
Gen.
important, no matter what it takes, even when it looks futile.
That was, what, like, almost 2 weeks ago now? So what's missing? I think there's only one thing really missing, isn't there? Yeah. Tomorrow. So 11/3 AMD Radeon, what is it? They don't say the name of it. I'm just gonna leave it at RDNA 3 because we don't actually know what it's called. Why is the font like so small? These are the products.
A shield.
These are basically like all the tech products all coming out at the same.
That's why.
You know, when I was at Micro Center on the day of Intel Arc's launch, when I was getting the Arc GPU, I was telling the clerk, you know, one thing that I don't like with these companies that are selling things in the consumer market. What is that music on the background? Oh, you want me to turn the music off? Erickson? Hey, that's the game. That was the game that I was playing earlier while waiting for people to join. I can mute it. But basically, the thing is, my complaint was, why is it that all of them are launching all the products within a 90-day window of each other? Why does it all have to be all at once? It's, in a way, it's convenient, but at the same time, it's not convenient because it just makes things almost unaffordable. There's just way too many products. It's like, you know, no one really knew when these things were going to launch earlier this year. So it's like if you were starting to save money to upgrade a new computer, or you're going to build a brand new computer, you didn't really know like how much you would need to save up. And considering the fact that all of these new products, especially with Nvidia stuff being super expensive, you know, it just makes it really, really hard for somebody who likes PC gaming or wants to build a workstation or wants to build a high-end mainstream computer to be able to afford it. Because it used to be that Nvidia used to launch their products on one year, and then AMD's Radeon stuff would be on the following year, and then somewhere in between you would have the CPUs. Now it's like all of us, ever since 2020, everything has all kind of been crammed into the last 3 months of the year. Like, all of it just gets crammed into the, what I call Q4 for the holiday season. It's really kind of strange. So, I don't know why they decided to do this. Especially with Intel moving 13th gen. Although Intel 12th gen was... Really, what happened was, out of everybody on this list, the ones that I think are kind of out of place are AMD and Intel. Intel and AMD are the ones that don't make sense. Well, no. Nvidia's not off the hook either, because Nvidia historically used to launch their products in the spring. All the Nvidia GPUs normally were in the spring, or they're like in the summer. In 2020, they moved them to late summer. Or actually, I take that back. It goes as far back as 2018. Yeah, like the RTX 20 series was a September launch. So I don't know. Maybe Nvidia has kind of kept to their original windows. Although I know they delayed the RTX 40 series by like a month and a half. Because I do think that the 4090 was supposed to launch in September, but they pushed it out 1 month because they wanted to push more sales of the 30 series. So that is a thing that actually happened. But historically, Nvidia has kind of kept to their target window. AMD's launch window is usually in Q4 for the CPUs. The GPUs are they're typically in the summer or late summer, if not in the... Well, historically AMD, it's usually in the summer. Like if you go back to like when Vega launched, when the RX 480 launched, when R9 Fury launched, AMD's always kind of been in the summertime for their GPUs. The CPUs on AMD's side, it's not as easy to predict because they weren't really a thing from like 2013 all the way till first gen Ryzen 2017. So there was a good like 4-year gap for AMD where they didn't really have any product launches that actually attracted enthusiasts. So, you know, historically, like Ryzen was March 2017. Zen Plus was April, May of 18. And then you had Zen 3 in the summer of 2019. And then you had, what did I say? Zen 3, Zen 2. And then Zen 3 was like 2 years ago. So, I don't know. AMD's kind of all over the place with the CPU launches. Although I think they typically would go with Q1 or Q4. And then Intel kind of moved around too. Intel used to be, historically, in the summer was when Intel would launch their products. But all of a sudden, ever since last year, they did a double launch, and now they're kind of launching in the fall. Well, they did do that with Coffee Lake, so it's not like it's the first time they've done this. I'm just saying that it just makes it harder for the average consumer to afford building a computer, upgrading their computer, just because all of these companies that make this hardware, they crammed it all into the last 3 months of the year. So it is what it is. I think we're getting the 4080 is like, what is it? The 16th? It's like 2 weeks or something. It's something like that. But yeah, anyway, let me see. Yeah, I was looking at the ARC ray tracing results. Somebody did leave a comment saying that the ray tracing results are they seem kind of off. They're not off. They're actually, so the way I did my benchmarking for Quake 2 RTX was I disabled any kind of resolution scaling. So in Quake RTX, there's a setting. It's a hidden setting called rendering scale. Well, it's not a hidden setting, but it's rendering scale options. If you turn that to dynamic or turn it on, it'll set it to dynamic, and then you can specify an FPS target that the game will try to get to by dynamically lowering the resolution. So in my case, like, I don't have that turned on, so I get 100% scaling, and what you see in the bar charts is what you get when you leave it at 100% scaling. So I stand by my results. They're completely valid. They're correct. I think in that video that was being referenced in the comment, the user that was benchmarking the game, wasn't doing it right. I think they had dynamic scaling turned on, and they just weren't aware of it. So yeah, that's basically the performance for ARC. But these kind of stand out because these are kind of interesting products, right? Like these, all this stuff right here, all this is all run-of-the-mill expected product launches, but this was unique. So out of all of them, I think the Intel Arc one, but none of them were without flaws. And we're gonna now point out all the flaws with all these. Well, okay, I can't comment on this because this hasn't happened yet. But we're gonna point out the flaws with all of these because there's a lot of flaws. None of these launches were perfect. All of them have some kind of problems, one or the other, and I've experienced problems on all of them, and I'm gonna start talking about that now. So, how do we want to do this? Let's see. We'll just go ahead and put this here. So AMD Ryzen 7000. BIOS issues. Well, okay, not BIOS issues. The issues with Ryzen are when XMP or Expo is enabled, the PC, it depends on the motherboard. You either lose S3 sleep, well, okay. Depending on the motherboard, S3 sleep is disabled, or the PC oftentimes hangs on wake. This is the biggest problem with AMD right now. So the only way to avoid this is to run your RAM at the JEDEC speeds, typically 4800, and just leave it on stock, and then you won't have this problem. So this is the main problem with the Ryzen launch, or the Ryzen product right now. Nvidia RTX. So I'm going to go on this one next. Other than that, there's really no problems with Ryzen 7000. It's very good performing. It's a pretty solid product, all things considered. This is just kind of an early teething issue, but this is the one issue that I've run into that I know affects multiple issues or multiple users. There are posts on Reddit, particularly on ASRock's forums, talking about this problem. But the thing is, in the case of ASRock and MSI disable S3, and I think they might disable S4 as well. So I'm not 100% sure on that, but I know that they disable S3 mode or S3 sleep, whereas Asus and Gigabyte leave it on, but your PC might hang on postcode 11 when waking from sleep. So this is the major issue with AMD Ryzen right now, or the 7000 series. So I just wanted to point that out. So let's talk about Nvidia real quick. Nvidia's problem is not, I think long term, these are never going to be a thing. Like, no one's going to care about what we're talking about here in this video. But I do want to kind of point these things out so that viewers are aware. Let me actually move the chat over here so I can see you guys. So if you guys have any comments about any of this, you know, you're free to just comment in the video. If you have a question about any of this stuff, I can go over it in detail. We've done a lot of coverage on a lot of different AM5 motherboards. So I've been scouring like Reddit posts, AMD support forums, basically all this to try to compile all this info. So when I'm writing this here, it's not like I'm just making this up. This is all like real stuff. So I just want to point that out. That's going to be the main drawback of, yeah, that's AM5. This is AM5. Well, it's only DDR5. All right, let's briefly mention RTX 4090, because 4090 has had issues. Well, we all know the problem with 4090, right? Like RTX 4090 at launch, Jay's 2 cents did a video about this, so it's not a new thing, but some motherboards didn't work or didn't detect the 4090 AIB correctly. So I think the Founders Edition card worked fine, but like the Strix had this problem. There was a bunch of AIB ones. I don't know if the Zotac one was affected. I think the Gigabyte one was affected as well. I don't know about MSIs, but this was a problem. It's already fixed. All the BIOS updates are already, like, motherboard BIOSes have already been released to address this problem. But this is a problem that you should be aware of if you are thinking of getting an RTX 4090 and haven't updated your motherboard BIOS, or you already have a 4090 and you run into this problem and you don't know how to fix it. This is what you need to do. You basically need to update the BIOS. The motherboard BIOS. The motherboard BIOS, not the graphics card BIOS, the motherboard BIOS. The other problem with the 4090, we already know, is the melting power cables. The PCIe power cables. Adapter. Specifically, the power cable adapter that is included in the box with the 4090. This is a serious problem. This could potentially be a fire hazard. But long term, this shouldn't be a problem. I think Nvidia is already recalling anyone who has run into this problem or is affected by it. I think Steve from Gamers Nexus already kind of pointed out, if you have a 150 volt rated cable, you need to get that replaced immediately. You should not be using your GPU with this cable. For some reason, some of the cards shipped from the factory with the 150 watt rated cable, there's the 300 volt cable. Did I say watt? Well, the 300 volt cable is not affected. So that's just something to be aware of. So these are the major problems with the 4090. So that product is not without its faults. So far, none of these products have a clean record of having a perfect launch. So next we have Intel Arc. So Intel Arc. Intel Arc GPUs. There's really, honestly, out of all these products, I do think that the Arc GPUs, if they had higher volume, they would probably actually be the smoothest product in terms of the least amount of issues that I've found with it. So the low volume at launch, so very hard to get. People are very frustrated with not being able to get one on launch day. I know there's a lot of people that complained to me about this when I was doing the live stream about this GPU. So low volume at launch, and then driver problems. But we all kind of knew that. All the reviewers already covered this. I myself talked about this in my first impressions video. So I even show you guys an example of one of the problems that you see just using the desktop, not even playing a game. So there's like a lot of issues with it on the driver's side. But other than that, it's smooth sailing. Like, there's not a whole lot there. I can't really find anything else wrong with it. And then Intel 13th Gen. This thing, too hot, high power, high temps. You know, these are the problems with Intel 13th Gen. And then the other problem is BSOD, blue screen of death, instability. There's been people who are unable to get XMP working. I don't know why this is like a thing. Maybe I should move. Hold on. Let me make this larger. Okay, why am I not able to see this? Okay. I don't know why I'm not able to resize it. It's kind of weird. Don't know why I don't have my scroll bar. Let me just cut all this, select this, delete it, because we already know about that, and then we'll just... what happened? Oh no, that's the game. What happened? That's not what I wanted to do. Oh, there it is. Okay, pasted it over here. But anyway, BSOD, I've run into this with Intel 13th Gen. So those wondering why I haven't done live streams using the 3900K, it's because sometimes it'll randomly BSOD on me. Like the other day, I was playing a game with the 1300K, and the computer just decides to blue screen to death, like right in the middle of playing the game. So I had to restart. So because of the instability problems, the other thing is, I guess it's early BIOS days. General instability, like people are unable to turn on XMP. Like there was someone who left a comment in my video on 13 Gen, unable to turn on XMP. Like it doesn't work for some reason. I don't know why. I'm gonna make this smaller so that it's easier to see. Okay, so well, it's not easier to see. So let's just, can I specify like 60? Okay. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like issues with that. It's not a smooth product either. Yeah, so unfortunately, out of all of them, if I had to rank one of them as the best one, I guess Intel Arc wins because it doesn't really have severe, like, annoying problems. In terms of AMD's Ryzen CPUs, it's pretty much smooth sailing if you're just using it normally. The only thing is, like, the sleep thing is very annoying. If you want to avoid this problem completely on AMD, on AM5, you unfortunately you have to turn off XMP or Expo. You have to run the RAM at stock. When you run the RAM at stock, the computer can go to sleep fine, it can wake up fine, and it's 100% stable. There's no instability. Now Intel, I haven't tried to turn off XMP, so that might be the reason why I'm getting the BSOD problem. But the thing is, like, I'd rather have to deal with sleep not working than having a blue screen of death while I'm doing something. That's far more annoying than this. So this is definitely probably ranking lower in my mind in terms of, like, not without issues. This definitely is a pretty serious problem. And I'm testing this with Z790, so I'm on a brand new motherboard. So it's not like I'm using this with last year's recycled hardware, right? So yeah, honestly, this to me is not that big of a deal. I mean, technically this is a fire hazard, so this could be pretty serious. But from what I have seen online, most people who have the 4090 have the 300 volt cable. So it seems like it's not that widespread, is what I'm saying. I feel like there are a lot of people posting on Reddit pictures of their card cable melting, and that does ruin the connector on the actual card, so you can't use the card anymore. You have to RMA it, and that's really, really annoying to have to deal with. So this is definitely not without issues, at least right now. Now, it remains to be seen if the 4080 will have this problem, because I don't know if it's too late. Like, what I mean by too late is the manufacturers who have already built the 4080 and have already shipped them to the depots are going to ship them to the retailers like Micro Center, Newegg, Mind Factory, whoever. Your order for the A770 finally went through recently. Okay. Yeah, hey Joel, I just wanted to update you. So I don't know if you saw my reply to your comment on the ARC video. So I looked at Dawood's video, and he has dynamic resolution turned on. You can even see it in the video. But yeah, like Quake 2 is pretty. It's pretty flexible. Like the Quake 2 RTX with Vulkan, you can set a dynamic scaling. Basically, you turn on dynamic scaling resolution, and then you can specify a target frame rate, and then the game engine will dynamically scale the resolution. Basically, it'll lower the in-game, the actual render resolution below the native resolution to achieve a higher frame rate. I'm pretty sure that's what he's doing, because as soon as I turned that on, I was getting the exact same FPS that he was showing in his video. So I'm not saying that he did it wrong. I just think that he's unaware that when he benchmarked the game, or at least, I don't think he was really benchmarking the game. I think he was just testing the game. I think he was about showing playability. Yeah. No, it's not FSR. What he had turned on, you can't see it. If you look in his settings, look where it says render scale options. It's called render scale options. in that it brings up a sub menu, and there you can enable dynamic or you can turn it off. In his case, he has to have it on. There's no way that he has that turned off, because there is no way that you're getting 100 plus FPS at 100% scale at 1080p on the Arc GPU. Like, basically his video is showing that you can play, you can do ray tracing with Arc, which is fine. I mean, yeah, and the cool thing about Quake 2 is it doesn't look, because the game is so old, even when you turn on dynamic resolution, it really doesn't look that bad, because it's already kind of blocky and old to begin with, so you don't really notice. It's already low polygon count, so at the end of the day, it doesn't really make it look that much worse, because it's already kind of low res, low texture to begin with, if that makes sense. Now, another game that has the same setting is Monster Hunter World, but Monster Hunter World doesn't have ray tracing, so but it does have the same dynamic scaling. Because we're not talking about FSR, we're not talking about upscaling technology. We're talking about a dynamic resolution scaler that's built into the Vulkan API. So that's basically what he's using. I don't know if he's aware that he was using that setting when he was showcasing the game or when he was capturing footage, but it's not a big deal. Like it does show that you can turn it on and you can get very good FPS with the game. But, you know, like, if you're going to benchmark it, you don't want to benchmark with dynamic resolution, because that's just going to throw off your results. Like, what I did to replicate his test is I turned on dynamic resolution, and if I set it to 120, sure enough, I can see it go up to 120. But, you know, if you do that on any of the other cards, then they're all going to do the same thing. So, probably what he has is, like, he has it set for like 999 or, you know, 500 FPS or something, and then it'll try to scale up to 500, but at that point it becomes fully GPU bound, because it will downscale enough, but then I think at a certain point it's still holding 1080, but it's downscaled to, like, you know, 0.5 or 0.25 or whatever it is, and then even then it still might not be able to hit 500 FPS. So I didn't try to test that. I didn't try to set the limit to 500, but, you know, I can set it to 120. I can get 120 FPS with RTX on. But the game does look, the textures look quite a bit worse when I do that. But yeah, it's a little disappointing, you know, like, none of these products. Oh, really? Was it an AIB or was it the Intel one? Was it one of the Acer models? Yeah, let me see if I can pull that up. Oh yeah, so let me see. Arc A770. Okay, yeah, it's out of stock now, but you know what? It looks like the Phantom Gaming is in stock. But that's the 8GB model. The Acer's also out of stock now. So the Predator for $399. You know, what I'm really interested in seeing, I hope somebody buys the Acer. Here, let me bring that up. I don't know if people can see that. Yeah, people can't see that. How do I share that window again? Okay. So I really want to see this GPU. I want to see somebody unbox this on YouTube and then do like a first impression video, just what it looks like when it's running. Yes, because you can see here if they have a picture of it. Yeah. So see, this one has dual 8-pin. The Acer one has dual 8-pin, which does mean that the Acer will overclock better. It won't be as power limited as the reference card. And it will probably, just by looking at this, it'll probably run with lower temperatures too. Although the reference card that I have, from testing it, the temperatures aren't that bad. So it's very similar to the 6700 XT in terms of the temperature on the Founders card. But this is a very unique design. I don't think anyone's ever done this before. As far as I can tell, I don't think I've ever seen anyone put a blower style fan in the middle and then have a traditional axial airflow fan, you know, in the normal spot. So that is really weird. You know, I almost would have done it. Well, I guess you have to do it this way because you have an air channel from the blower style cooler to the back, and then the larger fan pushes air onto the fin array, and then that's gonna go out the sides. Yeah, so that looks pretty cool. Honestly, that looks cool. I just really wish that this right here, I wish the Intel Arc logo would illuminate. I highly doubt that it illuminates, though. It's nice to have the fans light up, but I would rather have something on the side, like the branding. I'd rather have the branding light up than have the fans light up. Yeah, it's gonna be a while, because the thing is, like, with Tech Power Up, if you upload the BIOS to Tech Power Up, they have to validate it, and I don't know how long it takes them to validate that, because they have to, I think they have to somehow get one from Intel or an AIB themselves, and then they have to do a checksum. Basically, they have to make sure that you're not uploading like a virus or some kind of fake BIOS or some, you know, some mining BIOS or whatever, you know, trying to claim that it's the Intel Arc BIOS. So there's some kind of validation process to do that for them. So it'll be a while, yeah, especially for these AIB cards. Like, it's gonna probably take a very long time before you see an AIB card VBIOS show up on Tech Power Up. But this is a cool one too, like the Phantom Gaming one. Although this is literally just ASRock just took a Radeon cooler. This is literally one of the ones that they use for the Radeon cards. They just took it and they just reused it on the Arc GPU. Which is okay, but I don't like when AIBs do that, because it oftentimes, at least in the past, it's not a good result. And that's personally why I don't buy Asus, MSI, or Gigabyte graphics cards, because they typically don't make them for different GPUs. They typically make one cooler for one GPU. It's usually an Nvidia card, and then they just kind of repurpose that for like the AMD stuff, and you get mixed results. Like Gigabyte was notorious for this. Asus was really bad doing that, like, for years. So that's the reason why I don't recommend any of those three companies when it comes to graphics cards. I'll always recommend an AIB that only manufactures either Radeon or only manufactures GeForce. So, like, for example, Sapphire for AMD, XFX, Power Color, Vision Tech. Those would be who I recommend for AMD. And then for Nvidia, I'd recommend, well, I would say EVGA, but RIP EVGA. So, you know, Galax, Zotac, PNY, Palette. Those are the ones that I'd recommend for the GeForce side. I've heard issues with RTX Minecraft not loading. Yeah, has anyone done any coverage of Minecraft on the A770? It's funny you mentioned PNY. The thing is, a lot of people don't know this, but PNY is the one who makes all the high-end professional NVIDIA Quadro cards. They're the only one that does it. So if you were to buy like a $6,000 Quadro or like an RTX A40 or whatever it is, those are all made by PNY. PNY is the exclusive dealer for that. Okay, that's cool. I'm curious to know what that's gonna be like, because, yeah, no one's as far as I can tell, nobody there's not a single video on the internet showcasing Intel Arc and Minecraft RTX. That's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, I think I was the first one to do Quake, like, to actually show the real numbers on Quake. But I think there are some fake benchmark channels that are like fake, like, showing Quake, but I don't think they're showing it correctly, or they might be showing with some kind of dynamic resolution. Yeah, they gotta have the dynamic resolution stuff turned off, because that's gonna mess up the results. because we want to show absolute performance. All right, let me go back here real quick. I want to do my dailies. Where is this at? Okay, I gotta do my dailies real quick, and then we can keep talking about this, but let me see. I gotta turn some stuff in. Oh, actually, no, I don't have to do that. Do you think it'll run better than Quake 2 RTX? Yes, definitely. Quake is the worst case scenario because it's full path tracing, and there's nothing like, other than changing the resolution, there's no way to soften the GPU utilization for ray tracing with Quake. So in that regard, Quake 2 RTX is kind of the new crisis when it comes to testing true performance, like pure raw path tracing performance for ray tracing scenarios for GPUs. So yeah, it's a really good test, honestly. Global illumination is also a hit, but I was looking at his settings and I had the same settings as him. Like, both of us had the exact same global illumination settings. The only thing that really changes it, yeah, global illumination will change, will affect it, but I think you're talking maybe like 3 to 6%, depending on resolution. Now, if you're at lower resolution, it might be more like 9 to 12%. But like if you're testing RTX or Quake RTX at like 1440p, for instance, if you turn global illumination down, I don't know if it'll make that big of a difference, because from my own testing with Quake 2 at the higher resolutions, like for example, the reason why I didn't show 4K was because 4K was literally a slideshow, single-digit frame rate with Quake 2 RTX for not just the ARC, also the Radeon card. So yeah, but see, the 3070 Ti, that's not really a valid comparison, because that's completely different, right? Like, the 3070 Ti is way better at ray tracing than ARC and Radeon. Honestly, if I was gonna show an Nvidia like when I was doing that benchmarking video for ray tracing, I really wish I had an RTX like 2060 or like a 2060 12 gig, or like a 2070 Super or something along those, maybe a 2080. But 2080 is not really fair, because, you know, the price of a 2080 when it was new was so much more than ARC that I don't know if that's a fair comparison. But I do think that for my own testing, I really wish I had a 20 series Nvidia card, because that was their first generation ray tracing. And I do think it would be interesting to look at first gen ray tracing on Nvidia versus first gen ray tracing on AMD and first gen ray tracing on Intel. I do think that would have been an interesting comparison. I don't like comparing second gen Nvidia to first gen Intel. I just don't think it's fair, right? Like, it's like comparing apples and oranges, you know, like, obviously second generation is going to be significantly better. So that's why I have a 3080 Ti, but I'm not going to compare it, because it's way more expensive, completely different performance tier, and it's obviously second gen ray tracing. So I don't think it's a fair comparison. I don't like when benchmark videos have a whole bunch of graphics cards. This is not me trying to criticize like Hardware Unboxed, because they do amazing work with showing you a lot of different graphics cards. But I do think that it's easier to look at a chart that shows GPUs that are in the same price range, the same overall performance tier as the one that you're currently interested in. So, like, for example, like in my video, I did 6700 XT and the A770, and I even said in the video that that is the true comparison that we're looking at. Even though I put the 6900 XT in the video, that was just kind of there to show, like, you know, what is the best you can get on a first generation ray tracing product. right? Like, it's not really there to be a valid comparison for Intel Arc. Yeah. I can add that. Yeah, you know what? I forgot about that. We have one. I just need here. Yeah, let me see. Let me go ahead and see if I can add that. Let me go ahead and add that to the where is it at? All right, what I'll do, I'm gonna add it to the stream's description, the Discord link. Hold on. Okay, I found it. Where is... How do I get the thing into the description? Man, hold on, let me bring it over here. Where's invite? Invite people? Hold on. Or send a server invite link. Okay, let me do this. Okay, I'm gonna put this in the description. Wait, hold on. Where's the... Okay, I think this link will work. I hope it's the right one. So I've just added it into the description of the YouTube video. I think this is the right one. Yeah, you've got the 2080 Super. Noodles, you agree when you see Hardware Unboxed being heavily biased toward Intel Arc, it made me unsubscribe, saying it's mediocre of a GPU. But then compare XeSS to FRS. Yeah, see, a lot of people have been asking me to look at XeSS. The thing with that is, what am I supposed to compare it to? Because it's first generation for their upscaling technology versus potentially the first generation. Okay, so I see. I think Joel joined the Discord. You can see me in there. I'm the acclaimed. It says I'm playing Genshin Impact. So, yeah. But see, that's the thing. I do want to cover XeSS. The problem with XeSS is it's only in a very limited number of games, and I think I only have... Yeah, I see you in there. I think I only have like one game that does XeSS. I have to formulate a list, so... Or I might have to, like, run the game. I might have to, you know, bring the Arc GPU to a friend and, like, have them benchmark it. But that's going to be kind of... That's going to be complicated. I don't know how I'm going to get footage of that. It just makes it a lot harder. So, but I will cover it. I just haven't really come up with a good method yet for how to show, how to benchmark, or how to compare, like, XeSS versus FSR or DLSS. Now, obviously, in my case, if I do content showing DLSS, the only GPU that I have that can do X or DLSS is the 3090 Ti or the 3080 Ti. Those are the only two modern Nvidia GPUs. Oh, Tom's Hardware? Yeah, let me see. Metro Exodus. So that's a DXR implementation. So that's going to be kind of like what you guys saw in my Far Cry 6 results for ray tracing. Is this ray? Yeah, so DXR. So he's showing there. Hold on, let me make this larger. It's hard for me to see it. There we go. So, where's Arc? 119, 10, a high, medium, Okay, so 100 versus 119. Yeah, I mean, I can see that. It's just, I wonder, like, okay, he's doing medium shaders. Okay. And his minimum, I don't know. I don't have the game. But so I can't really compare. But the thing is, that's DXR. So the results are going to be kind of like Far Cry 6, Tomb Raider, I would assume. But Metro is more of like a neutral game. I think it's neutral. I'm not 100% sure. The last Metro game that I played was Last Light. I have Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light. Those are the only two Metro games that I have. And neither one of those have ray tracing. So, I mean, this looks... it looks believable to me. Is on high, but the textures are on medium. Okay. Yeah. See, I don't know. I think from my point of view, I would want to test it with ultra, like high or ultra shaders, and just set ray tracing on high. Typically, most of the games with ray tracing don't really have more than 2 or 3 settings for ray tracing. There's usually like ray tracing high, ray tracing ultra, and then something called ray tracing performance, or it might just be ray tracing low. It's usually just 3 settings. And then in some games, like for instance, Resident Evil Village, that game doesn't even have like a ultra or high or low. It literally has like 2 settings in the menu. You can either turn on like ray trace shadows, and there's like ray trace reflections. And it's either you either turn them on or you turn them off. There's no like ultra, there's no low, there's no medium. It's either on or off. And then that's all you get. So that's the reason why if I would test it, I would kind of set everything to the ultra preset and then turn ray tracing on and then see what the results are. But yeah, this looks interesting because it's so close to the 3070. In fact, I don't know, like, I'm not saying that these results are invalid, but the fact that ARC is doing 82 on the 99th percentile versus 66 on a 3070 Ti, that just looks a little weird to me. I would have expected the 3070 to have a higher, 1% low. I'm surprised ARC's 1% low is so good, considering everything that I have seen in my own testing with the GPU. ARC usually has worse minimums than Radeon and Nvidia. So I'm surprised that in this particular title, it's doing really well. I'm not saying that it can't happen, but it just seems like that's an interesting result. Are you sure? I don't think so. Not at 1080p. At 1080p, you're not going to be VRAM limited on a 3070 Ti. I mean, look at the 67 and the 6750. Those are 12 gigabyte, so they're not VRAM limited. They have the same amount of RAM as a 3080 Ti, so they're not VRAM limited, and they're doing like 106 and 100, and then ARC is apparently beating them somehow. That'll be an interesting one. If I had the game, I'd definitely test it. But that almost looks like a best case scenario. Because look at how close it is to 3070. So and it has higher 1% low. I don't know. That just looks really, it looks like an outlier, I would say. Just from my own experience using the card, like the minimums are never really that good. I don't think I've seen any game that I've tested, regardless of whether I was using ray tracing or not, where ARC had significantly higher minimums over the other cards. So I don't know about that, but who knows? Maybe it's just Metro in particular is just really good with ARC for some reason. But yeah, that's interesting though. In general, though, I would say that looking at my own results, my own experience with the card, as well as looking at what other people have shown in their reviews of ARC, I would say the ray tracing performance is more like the upper. It's kind of like I still think it's more like Radeon than it is like GeForce. I really don't think that the ray tracing on ARC is the same as GeForce. I definitely think the 30 series is better, at ray tracing than Intel's implementation. So let me let's get this out of the way. Actually, I'll turn this down and then turn that back. But yeah, I still need to cover XESS. I just need to figure out what few games that I have that support XESS, and then I can do comparisons. One thing I did notice, I think it was Tomb Raider. It was either Tomb Raider or Far Cry 6. One of those games had XESS as an option. But the cool thing about XESS is you can run it on Radeon and GeForce. You're not just limited to ARC. It's just like with FSR. So it works across all different, it's multi-vendor, which is really, really nice. But it allows you to see how it works on other GPUs, how well it actually works on other GPUs. Right now, I assume XESS should work best on Intel, but I haven't really looked too much into it. I think the only video I watched for XESS was Digital Foundry. And I never watched Harbor Unbox's video on XESS yet, so I haven't actually seen what their opinion is. But what I do know is that when Digital Foundry tested XESS, they found that it works relatively well on Nvidia's cards, but then when they tested it on AMD's cards, the response time, the milliseconds, were worse. They were significantly worse on Radeon than they were on GeForce when they were using XESS. So that's just interesting, because that I found that fascinating, because I personally think that ARC and Radeon are far more similar in terms of the hardware and just the overall, like, how they're architected compared to how GeForce is set up. So I was surprised that XESS was better on GeForce and worse on Radeon. I would have thought that it would have been better on Radeon and worse on GeForce, or at the very least the same on both. So I don't know. Nvidia does some interesting things with their driver. Sometimes their driver is very CPU heavy. Other times it's very agnostic, like it doesn't really care what platform you're using. This is the reason why back in the days of like Bulldozer and AMD FX, like the 8350, back then, if you wanted to get a lot of performance out of your AMD Radeon card, you would typically want to pair it up with an Intel CPU back then. Whereas with an Nvidia card, you could take an Nvidia, like for example, a GTX 970, and man, I wish I would have done videos about this way back when, but I remember taking a GTX 970, testing it with Final Fantasy XIV on an Intel i7 4770K, so a 4th gen Haswell, and then I compared it. Then I ran the same GPU on an FX 8350 system, and the performance in Final Fantasy XIV, the minimums in the city was relatively the same, regardless of which CPU I was using. When I was using an Nvidia GPU, now when I would use an AMD GPU, it was significantly better when paired with the Intel CPU, and a lot worse on the AMD CPU. So it was really weird, because AMD plus AMD back then was not a good experience. You wanted to go Intel CPU plus AMD GPU for the best experience, and then if you were on Nvidia GeForce, it didn't really matter. You would get really good performance if you were on AMD FX or if you were on Intel. And then again, if you were in games that were GPU bound, it wouldn't really matter, because, you know, the CPU doesn't matter as much. So it was very interesting stuff, like the fact that Nvidia typically back then was a lot more CPU agnostic in terms of it worked fine with either one. Like it didn't really favor one over the other, if that makes sense. I found that interesting, that AMD's own graphics cards favored Intel for that higher single thread performance count back in the day. And even today, like if I was recommending like a Radeon build, although now it doesn't really matter so much at the upper high end, but like if like for instance the 13th gen i5, the 13600K, like that plus the you know, like the upcoming Radeon cards that are going to be announced tomorrow, right? Like that would be fine. Like I wouldn't have a problem running one of those. Or even the current stuff, like the 6750 or the 6900 with the 13th gen. I think that would be fine.
Hear my prayer. sins weigh upon your soul. You stand condemned.
So this is like the newest boss. I forgot who it was that reminded me on one stream to go back and collect my commission for the daily. I can't believe I forgot that.
Do your worst. We shall prevail.
Judgment is upon you.
Oh, he keeps like going back into that fortified mode where I can't deal damage. Oh wait, here we go.
You stand condemned. Your penance is due.
Oh wow, she got one shot. That wasn't supposed to happen.
You're exposed.
Futile. Nowhere to run.
Control also seemed to run well on art in the video from Digital Foundry. Yeah. I don't know what Control... Is Control using DXR? I don't know what the renderer is in that game. I know Digital Foundry likes to use Control for a lot of their comparison videos. They've been using it ever since it was released. Oh, it's DX12. Okay. Yeah, if I had to guess, I would say that it's probably best with DXR. But, you know, Minecraft, I don't know. I just think that if you go full path tracing, it's not that good. Like, a game that it did pretty good in was RE Engine games, like Resident Evil. Resident Evil Village, it did really well. But then again, like, a lot of games do really good in Resident Evil Village, so... Or a lot of GPUs did really well. So, I don't know, it's one of those things where it's like... It's very game-specific, in my mind. Because, like I said in my video, I do think that if the GPU already does well... in the rasterization performance for that said title, then, you know, the ray tracing performance will also be pretty well. It'll do good. It'll scale linearly with the game. Yeah, I think we're just farming this one boss. But we'll see what happens tomorrow, because tomorrow will be RDNA 3's announcement. They'll finally unveil RDNA 3 officially. So all these leaked images of the reference cooler, all these like leaked images or these leaked specs of the shader count, the memory bus, the VRAM amounts. It'll be interesting to see what happens with AMD, because I do think that Intel kind of missed the mark just with the graphics. So it's going to be 3 p.m. Central tomorrow. Or if you're on Pacific time, 1 p.m. Pacific. I think they're actually... The event is in Vegas. So if anyone's been watching Jay's 2 Cents, Jay's 2 Cents will be there in person. I'm pretty sure all the other big YouTube tech channels will be there as well. I'm covering... I think Paul will be there. I don't know who from Linus is going, if anybody. They might send somebody down.
Good deeds.
But it's gonna be in Vegas. It's tomorrow, 2 p.m. Mountain Time,
All will be
4 p.m.
placed
Eastern,
on scale.
1 p.m. Pacific. Yes. So if you go to AMD's YouTube channel, you should be able to notify yourself of the announcement if you want to watch it live tomorrow. I'm going to try to watch it live. I don't know if I'll be free at the time, but I'm definitely stoked to see what they're going to announce, because honestly, if those leaked images of the cooler are real, then they're going to be the efficiency king this generation, although they technically already were, because the 30 series already was less efficient than the Radeon RDNA 2 cards. So actually, that reminds me. So let's try to find that article. Let me bring that article up here from WCCF Tech. So let's go over this briefly. Let me bring that back on screen. Was it this one? No, it's this? No. Where is it? Oh, this one. Okay. So, watch the AMD Radeon 7000 RDNA 3 GPU unveil. Live stream here. Gaming GPUs enter the chipset era. So, or chiplet era. So, this will be interesting because AMD finally will be using chiplets for their GPUs. Now, a long time ago, when I say a long time ago, I really mean like 2015 or maybe 2014. AMD showed how. Oh, have I tried? I haven't done that yet. I will try to do it later. But I'm gonna do a video on XESS, and then I'll look at DXVK. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna try to test that out, because I'm pretty sure
I'm not the best judge of other
that
people's
mod
sense of
might
humor.
be a legitimate way to get way better performance for the older games. But the thing is, you have to test older games like DX9. Ideally, you want to test DX9, because DX11, I think Intel will actually work on DX11 performance, but DX9 is the one that you have to actually rely on Microsoft emulation. So I do think for DX9 games, that is where the DXVK really helps a lot. So that will be something I definitely want to look into. So let's take a look here. Save the date. If we try to play the video, it says right here, November 3rd, 3 p.m. That's going to be Central. And then we've got, what does it say here? So Dr. Lisa Su, join AMD for Together We Advance Gaming, announcing the next generation of GPUs built on the groundbreaking AMD RDNA 3 architecture, delivering new levels of performance, efficiency, and functionality to gamers and creators. Our high-end RDNA 3 GPUs will deliver strong increases in performance and perf per watt compared to our current products, and include new features supporting high resolution, high frame rate gaming. We look forward to sharing more details later this week. So she's going to take to the stage, probably showcase the reference model, probably also announce the launch date as well as the price. The rumors say that it'll be in December, which that's kind of like what they did 2 years ago, guys. Because remember, the 6900 XT launched on December 8th, 2020. But the thing is, the 6800 XT launched in November 2 years ago. I forgot the day. I think it was the same week. Well, I don't remember if it was a week before or after the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, because I'll never forget that year. I'll never forget those launches, because the PS5 launch was traumatizing, and the Xbox Series X launch was almost just as bad. And then that was when scalpers became mainstream, and bot, like, what is it? The bot that tells you when the drops are happening, that became a regular thing for people to literally just watch YouTube live streams of people like Jake Randall, or just the bot itself, like, doing the drop notifications. Like, it's kind of ridiculous that that's what the world became 2 years ago. And it was basically like that until this summer. So, I don't know. Hopefully the PS5 is now a normal thing to
can swing the
buy,
results
but I
of
highly
a
doubt
single
it.
game.
Let's see. Join
It's
us
bound to run out
on
soon.
November 3rd for the unveiling of RDNA 3 and the world premiere of exciting new footage from Callisto Forspoken, a sneak peek at something amazing from our friends at Ubisoft, and a whole lot more. Okay, so that's cool. You know, honestly, there was a picture. Yeah, I don't like the way this looks. I personally don't like the... Where's that leaked cooler? Was it this one? No, that's not it. There's actually a leaked cooler in one of these articles, and I don't like the way it looks. I like the way the current 6000 series looks better. I just think that it looks too much like an AIB card. It just doesn't look good. Intel ARC GPUs will run better on Intel CPUs compared to AMD CPUs.
Sometimes, but
I don't really know if AMD GPUs run better with AMD CPUs. I think they're about the same. I can test it with... See, so here's the thing right now for me. I was thinking of testing ARC with my Alder Lake 12700K, but unfortunately I don't have a cooler for the ARC or for the 12700 right now. Because the cooler that I have for Alder Lake, I only have one cooler that's compatible with Alder Lake, and it's currently being used with my 13900K. The reason why I don't want to run ARC with the 13900K, well, I may end up having to do that now that I think about it. The reason why I don't want to do that, though, ideally, is because I do use the 13900K for production, and I don't want to be running... I can't run... Like, if I'm going to benchmark ARC, I don't want to run it on a production PC. I want to run it on the test bench PC, if that makes sense. So, right now, the test bench PC is the 5800X, the X570 platform. Now, if I was going to change that to the Z690, I can... But I don't have a cooler that works with Alder Lake because it's the only one I have is being used with my Raptor Lake, if that makes sense. So I'd have to either buy another cooler, I'd have to get at least like another NHD15, or some other cooler like a Be Quiet or something, and then I'd have to basically migrate everything over to the Alder Lake system, and that's kind of time consuming. So, but yeah, I did test it initially with the AMD or the Intel 12th gen, and I did run into some issues. I did do a video about that. It's not like it doesn't work. It does work. It works pretty well, but I don't really know if it's that different. I'll tell you right now, rebar on Intel CPUs versus rebar on AMD CPUs, it's really not going to make that big of a difference because it's literally... All it does is it allows the GPU full access to, or it allows the CPU full access to the entire VRAM on the GPU, as opposed to having to send things in a small 256 megabyte window. So I don't think it'll make that big of a difference, but I can try it with the Intel CPU. At some point, I will test it with an Intel CPU. Mainly because with an Intel CPU, you get the dual encoding. So when I test the encoding performance, I will have to at some point test it with the Intel CPU. So, and that would be with either 12th gen or 13th gen. I don't think the dual encoding works on anything older than 11th gen.
Good deeds. And
no, you don't have to. But you should. You should turn it off. So, I think I explained all of this in my first impressions video. Because when I first installed ARC, I installed it into the 12700K system. And I had a black screen. I couldn't get into Windows. And I didn't understand what was going on until it dawned on me that, oh, you know what? Maybe the video is coming out of the motherboard. So I moved the DisplayPort cable off of the ARC GPU onto the motherboard, and sure enough, I could see the login screen on Windows. So then I had to use the onboard graphics to get it up and running. So, meaning it's much, much easier
Luck
to
can swing the
turn it
results of a
on
single game.
or get it to work with an AMD CPU. Well,
bound to
not a
reverse
7000
soon.
series AMD, but a 5000 or older AMD CPU, because none of those Ryzen CPUs have integrated graphics unless you have the APU, which not a lot of people do. So, alright, I don't know where this, where is this? Yeah, so here it is. See, so this, I don't like the way this looks, personally. This to me looks too much like an AIB card.
Good deeds.
I really prefer the look of the older 6000 series reference
In the
card.
end, all will be placed upon the scales.
Alright, we need to do one more of these. Because it shouldn't make that much of a difference. Resizable bar, as long as you have it turned on, doesn't matter what CPU you have. It gives the CPU full addressable. It's fully addressable for all the VRAM, so it doesn't matter what CPU it is. How much time till the event? 12 plus, like, what? 18 hours? 18 hours. Oh, she got hit. Oh no. Okay.
Do your worst.
Your sins weigh upon your soul.
Yeah, it is a while to wait. But you think about it, it's the last major product launch of the year for the enthusiast PC crowd.
Grant us your blessing. You.
I saw them announce 8,000. I didn't see them announce 10,000. Maybe it was the same announcement. It's one of those things where it's like the 10,000. The 10,000 was like, oh, and by the way, I have one more thing.
Pin them down.
Yeah, that's the thing about the RAM right now. The RAM situation is kind of all over the place. Oh, I'm not able to damage this thing. Alright, now the final phase. We're gonna hit all three of these things. Then it helps if you electrocute them. Okay. Man, this game, I'm not gonna lie, as much hate this game gets, it's actually pretty fun. It's a pretty fun casual game. ROG, yeah. Well, yeah, the motherboard does make a difference because the Apex is the small one, right? That's the one that only has 2 DIMMs, and that does help a lot. Because I'll kind of draw it out for you guys just to illustrate why the 2 DIMM is better. That's a really good question. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if. See, here's the thing though. Like, you bring up an interesting point about the higher speed RAM, but the thing is with the Vcache, I don't know if the Vcache really matters as much. Because hold on, let me bring this back up. So anyway, hold on. This is the so this is the problem. This is basically all the issues with all these recent product launches. And out of all of them, this has the least amount of problems. Strangely enough, Intel Arc, the problems with it are not as serious as the problems with some of these other products that have launched. So that's interesting. So what I find here is notice that the product that reviewers criticize the most actually has the least amount of problems post-launch. That's interesting. DDR5 has been... Oh, the other thing too about the AMD one, I didn't point this one out, but the Agisa 1003 lowers the boost algorithm for, I think it's like up to 4 cores, I forget, on some motherboards. I don't know why that is. The other thing too is for some reason the Gigabyte boards run cooler than the others. I don't know why that is. Maybe that means that Gigabyte's less aggressive on the auto voltage. But that's something that's too hard to pin down, so I'm not going to mention it here. Whereas this is annoying. Too hot, too high power, high temps, high power consumption, whatever. That's annoying. I guess I'll also add fan noise because it's so hot. Like this is 102C stock. Like, that's really, really annoying. Now, granted, at full load, that's when you're doing, like, a video render or something, you're going to see that. You're never going to see this, like, playing a game. That's not going to be a thing. So I wouldn't worry there. But honestly, this is only 13900K. The i5 and the i7 don't have this problem. And they don't have this. Well, I mean, yeah, they're not as bad. Like the high power is really just this one. I can't recommend the i9. The i9 is unfortunate because the i5 is good. The i7 is also surprisingly good, but the i9 is just kind of a joke. Yeah. This is going to requires power, like, this requires a PL1 and PL2 limit. Like, it's seriously, like, I guess I'll say the 13900K requires it. Not the other two, but the 13900K. Yeah, see, here's the thing with the i9. So if you buy an i9... If you turn off all 16 E-cores to get a better ring bus speed, more stability with Windows 10, so you're not like BSODing randomly, then you just wasted a ton of money. Because you could have just, like what Joel's saying, you could have just bought an i7, 13700K, saved a whole lot of money, and then if you gimp it by turning off all the E-cores, it's not that big of a loss because you only disabled 8 E-cores as opposed to taking an i9, which is way more money, and then turning off 16 E-cores. You literally turned off 2/3 of your cores. That just sounds like a really bad deal. Yeah, no, yeah, I saw that video. They're really not that energy efficient. So it's... Yeah, out of all these product launches, I gotta give the win to Intel Arc. I'm sorry, like Intel Arc doesn't have like the serious type of issues that are kind of a make or break for certain people. Like on my video where I compared Intel 13th Gen with Ryzen 7000, there are multiple comments on that video saying that they're not gonna run water. That they refuse to run liquid cooling. And I don't blame them because I personally don't care to run liquid cooling either. So I want to run it on air. And the fact that I can't run a CPU at stock on an air cooler and not have it overheat and thermal throttle, that's unacceptable. To me, that's absolutely unacceptable. Do you think that Apple would ever make a product that does something like that? No. And why do you think people worship Apple? Like it's the best thing since sliced bread? Well, because they know what consumers want. Unfortunately, they just do. Right? Apparently, Intel doesn't know that. They don't know that people don't want a CPU that thermal throttles out of the box and can't be cooled by a massive NHD15. Yeah, well, the thing is, it's the socket. It's AM4. Because the socket couldn't exceed, what was it, what was it, like 140 watts? Like, you can't go above a certain number on AM4 in terms of the power consumption. It was a limitation of the PGA socket that they were using. And that's the reason why, like, they really, really wanted to go to a newer socket, because the socket, AM4 itself, was literally holding back the 5950X from being able to basically run right past Alder Lake. Because at the end of the day, the Ryzen 7000 CPUs fundamentally aren't that different from the 5000 CPUs. It's the same architecture. There are a little bit of improvements that they made to the process, but really, the main change with AM5 is the node shrink down to 5 nanometer and the new socket. The new socket allowing them to pull up to 230 watts on the socket power. So that means that they're no longer power limited like they were on the 5000 series in AM4. And the new node allows them to clock the frequency so much higher, 5.5 up to 5.8 gigahertz on like 2 threads or something. So that alone is the major difference between Zen 4 and Zen 3. And the other thing too, obviously, is the DDR5. So DDR5 gives you way more memory bandwidth than DDR4, typically. So that's the main improvements with the current AM5 or Zen 4 versus Zen 3. That is to say that Zen 4 is not a new architecture. Zen 4 is a node shrink with newer technology. So basically Zen 5 or Zen 4 Plus or whatever, well, not Zen 4 Plus, Zen 5 will be the true new architecture, which will be a major change, just like how Zen 2 was a major change from Zen 1, and then Zen 3 was a major change from Zen 2. So yeah, he was probably using curve optimizer though to get such good temperatures on a 360 radiator. The 360 radiator is not it's better than what I'm using, but it's not like that much better than what I'm using. So for those wondering, like if you have a Noctua NHD15, a Noctua NHD15 is typically the same as having a 240 or 280 millimeter rad. So a 360 will outperform the Noctua in most cases. Now the cool thing about the Noctua is not only does it cool the CPU, because the fans are in such close proximity to the VRM, the VRM also gets cooled by the fan, blowing air across the VRM, in particular the one at the back, so the one toward the back of the motherboard near the I/O. So that's why I like the air cooler, because the air cooler also reduces the temps on the VRM. Whereas if you're running a radiator, then the VRMs are going to run hotter usually compared to using a big air cooler. But if you have good airflow from like the top mounted fans, or if you're using something like a fractal torrent, then it shouldn't be that big of a deal if you're using a radiator. But it does make a difference for the VRM temps. Yeah, it is. These are all the problems. Nothing's perfect. None of these are perfect. I'm serious. Like, it's kind of sad. But if you look at it, like, this is the least amount of problems, which is very, very surprising, right? Like, who would have thought the one product out of all four of these that had the worst reviews, because, Ryzen reviewed relatively well. The 4090 was very well received until the whole power cable issue. And then 13 Gen was also well received for the most part. Everybody complained about like the high temps though and the fan noise. But the thing is, the ARC GPUs, a lot of people reviewed it pretty poorly. Like they criticized it low. Like they didn't talk about the volume, But they talked about drivers, poor performance in games, kind of performances all over the place, depending on the toss. It's basically like a coin toss, 50-50. Is the game going to perform good or not? You know, like, I don't know. But post-launch, you know, all things considered, Arc doesn't really have that many problems. I mean, yeah, it's not as good at performing, but, you know, and it's low volume, but, you know, that's more of like a minor inconvenience than having to deal with BSODs, not being able to turn on XMP, or if you're on AMD, oh, you can't use sleep if you're running XMP or Expo on some motherboards. You know, oh, it's like, these to me are more annoying than, like, driver problems that aren't actually game breaking oftentimes. So yeah, 4090 was well received by scalpers. Oh man, that's so sad. I don't want to hear about eBay. Don't talk about eBay in the 4090. That I don't want to hear about that. We're about to hear, like, we're within 24 hours of the RDNA 3 launch, and you're talking about 4090s being scalped and resold on eBay. That is not what I want to hear, because we already know that the same thing's going to happen in RDNA 3. Arc's problems are severe, but yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Well, you know what's coming up? You know what's coming up soon? What about this? RTX. Well, remember the whole, like, remember the fake? Remember the fake 4080? Remember how that was a thing? Fake 4080? Fake 4080 was a thing too, although that didn't really affect the impressions of the 4090. But, you know, soon there's going to be RTX 4080. The true, we'll just say the true one. So, the 16GB one. But, you know, RTX 4080, I think that's launching on the 16th or the 17th of this month, if I'm not mistaken. So that's going to be interesting. We're going to be covering that. We're going to talk about, like, the AIBs. I mean, how those compare. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get one of those. Because, obviously, I wasn't able to get a 4090 thanks to, you know, all the scalpers and all the bots. So that was never a thing. But I have a feeling that this is going to be scalped even harder, and it's going to be gone faster than this. Because, as far as I know, on launch day, you could actually walk into Micro Center and buy a 4090, like on launch day. Now, with this, I don't know, because there'll probably be higher production volume at launch for the 4080 because it's cheaper, it's a different die, it's smaller, so that should mean that there's more yield, there's more volume at launch. However, I do think that because this card is slightly more affordable at a amazing value of $1,200, starting at $1,200, mind you, which means the AIBs are typically going to be more expensive, probably closer to $1,500 or $1,400. I'm talking about you, Asus, with your Strix. But that's probably going to get gobbled up by scalpers and bots way faster than the 4090 because it's cheaper, which means somebody out there who's going to try to flip it on eBay is more willing to take the gamble of purchasing one of these and reselling it on eBay versus having to pay, you know, $1,600 or even like $2,000 in the case of the Asus Strix 4090, and then trying to flip that on eBay. So I don't know. Have I seen the new Adore TV video? Yeah, yes. Yes, but the thing is, in his video, he didn't really, you know, he just kind of left it open-ended in terms of what he thinks, who will actually win. Because I think when people watch his videos are kind of like, I think the main reason people watch his videos are to find out if the AMD card will be faster or not. I think that's the whole point of people clicking on the video. But then his video didn't really answer the question, right? He talked a lot about the yields. He talked a lot about how much it costs to manufacture the chiplets, and how AMD's saving money that way. But it doesn't really matter in the end because people still buy Nvidia. So Nvidia still has very high profit margins. So wait. Okay, hold on. Zen 2. Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, you gotta remember, when Zen 2 came out. Here's the thing. Okay, guys, like let me tell you the truth about this, because I think a lot of people are missing the point on Adored TV's video. Yeah, no, I mean I agree with you, Power Man, to some extent, but I do want to say one thing about that. You guys got to think of it like this. Has everybody in the chat, have you guys all seen the movie Gladiator? You know, Russell Crowe. I think the movie came out in the year 2000. Or maybe it was 1999 or 2001. The movie Gladiator has a message that applies to the concept of mindshare. When Russell Crowe, Maximus was, he was like a slave, and he was trying to get his way to Rome so he could get revenge for the death of his wife and his son. Basically, he was given advice by the man who basically bought him, and then eventually, like, he ended up freeing himself, I guess. But you guys get what I'm saying, right? Like, what did he tell him in the movie? What was the advice that he told Maximus, or aka Russell Crowe, in the movie Gladiator? He told him something when he was going to go to Rome, when he was going to go to compete in the Colosseum as a gladiator. He told him something. Win the heart of the crowd. If you can win the heart of the people, you can stay alive. You can become the true champion. So you got to think back to 2019. What happened in 2019 when AMD launched Zen 2? What was the main thing that happened? Do you guys remember Linus's video about the announcement of Zen 2? The 3000 series? I'm talking about AMD's 3000 series Ryzen CPUs and the X570 motherboard. And the B550. Exactly. Everybody liked it. And the thing is, the influencers all praised it. You know, Linus said, for the first time, you now have parity between AMD and Intel. So what happened was, when the 3800X came out, the 3950X, the 3900X, the 3600X, and then the Value King, the Ryzen 5 3600, what happened? Single thread performance was tied. For the first time in a long time, Zen 2 tied Coffee Lake in single thread performance, which means the 3800X was equal to the 9900K in single thread performance, which means in multi-thread they would be the same, but then obviously AMD would be better because AMD had higher core count. I don't know what's going on with this, why I can't scroll. Maybe because I'm like zoomed in too much or something. Okay, hold on. Let's kind of draw this out. Let me we'll just type something down here, make this smaller font. Hold on, let me mute this thing here. Okay. So this is what happened, right? So you had Ryzen 9. Oh, and here's the thing. That was the first time that Lisa Su did the whole, oh, and I have one more thing. She did the I have one more thing. And it was the 3950X. When she showed how there was that missing chiplet. When she showed the was it the 3800X or whatever it was, there was like the one CCD and then the IO die. Basically, she showed that off. So this is 12 core, 24 thread. This is 16. This was the first 16 core, 32 thread. This is what made them win the crowd. It was the fact that they had a 16 core, 32 thread consumer mainstream desktop, which you never could get in the past. Like, without buying, like, some super expensive Xeon from Intel or, you know, some kind of HEDT that didn't even scale to 16 cores. So you had, because what was it? Like, the 7980, the 7980XE, that was like a 10 core or something like that, if I remember. Maybe it was a 12 core. I can't remember anymore. So you had the 8 core, 16 thread, you had, and then, okay, so basically where I'm going with this is these CPUs launched 6 core, 12 thread, and then what was the equivalent from Intel? What was the best you could get with Intel? You could get this Intel Core i9 9900K, which is an 8 core, 16 thread. These two CPUs were tied. Effectively, they tied in performance. So here's the thing. If they tie in single thread, that means that if you have a higher core count, you will be the performance king, because your competition has nothing that can compete with that. They were basically kind of uncontested. Now, yes, Intel did have, you know, X299. They had Skylake X, but AMD had Threadripper. So it wasn't, it was still lost because, you know, Threadripper, what was it? TRX 40, the Threadripper 3000 series was insanely good. In fact, there's a lot of people that are still on it today. That just kind of, that was basically AMD just going Super Saiyan 3, and then Intel couldn't really respond. So that's what happened. Like, this is what made them win. The product stack was superior in every way. Now, where are we today with the CPUs? You know, nothing has changed. You can effectively buy the exact 4 CPUs in terms of core count and thread count with the new Ryzen 7000 stuff. So what happened since 2019, and now you fast forward 3 years later, it's actually a little bit more than 3 years, because these were July 7th, 2019 was when these launched, right alongside the 5700 XT, the first PCI Gen 4 GPU on the market. So what do you have today, right? You have the exact same thing. You have the 7950X, the 7900X, the 7700X, and the 7600X. So you have the exact same core and thread count. So people say that AMD is stagnating. I don't really think that's true. They have stuff in the works. A lot of people don't know about this. If you want to know what's coming down the pipe, go look up AMD Bergamo. Go Google this, and then that'll tell you what AMD's big core, little core answer will be to Intel. Because this is using something called Zen 4C. Zen 4C. Zen 4C, the easiest thing I can tell you that is kind of like Intel's E-core. It's kind of like an E-core. Whereas a Zen 4 core, which is what's in the Genoa, Zen 4 is sort of like Intel's P-core. So it's not like AMD doesn't have E-cores. A lot of people in the consumer market don't know this. This is kind of like hidden information. Only people that work in the industry, in terms of like the enterprise, the server world, the data center world, will be aware that this is a real thing, right? So Intel's scared because Intel knows that AMD has an answer to their higher thread count. So Intel is the first mover when it comes to implementing the big core, little core hybrid. Okay, so questions on this. Do you think the 4080 16GB is a bad price at $1,200? Leakers know about. Yeah, I know leakers know about it, but I'm just saying in general, when people look at this, and then they look at Intel, because let's look at, you know, what's Intel got. So today, Intel has i9 13900K, that is labeled as 8P plus 16E. So that's 32 thread, right? So that they have the same thread count at the upper end, just like AMD. So they match AMD in the thread count. Then you have the i7 13700K with 8P plus 8E. This is what? 16 plus 24 thread. So this matches the 7900X in thread count. And then you have the i5. I do like that Intel has a condensed lineup this time around, at least at launch, but it won't stay that way. 6P plus 8E, 20 thread. That is a $500 price increase, the same performance tier as 30 series. So, okay, the question was, do I think that 4080 gigabyte is 16 gigabyte is a bad price at $1,200? Yeah, it is, but the thing is, it's kind of replaced what the 3080 Ti's price point was. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't know because Nvidia is pricing the 4080 at $1,200. It doesn't make much sense for them to introduce a 4080 Ti further down the line, like basically sometime next year, because they've already priced the 4080 so high to begin with, which is kind of weird. Like let's talk about Nvidia's pricing now. But yeah, so let me move this out of the way. Right, but basically, like, I was trying to mention this because I know, like, Power Man was talking about the Zen 2 moment. So okay, let's talk about Adore TV's video real quick. But I don't think there's a whole lot to say about that other than the fact that he's claiming that, you know, the Zen 2 moment. The thing is, when this happened, what were they competing with? They were competing with this. All they had to do was beat this thing, and they did. They tied it in single thread, so these two were effectively the same. But what was the difference? What is the price of this? This was like $539 or something, if I remember correctly, $549, and then you could buy it at Micro Center for $499. I know, I remember. So that was this price. But then what was this thing priced at? This thing was what, $349, if I remember correctly? Maybe it was $399. I can't remember. Wasn't this one like $249 or something? And then this might have been $3. I don't remember exactly the prices. Maybe this was only $300. I don't remember. The bottom line is AMD was cheaper while having the same single thread performance. And that's what caused them to win. Because they could scale up to the higher core count, price these at a premium, because this thing was $749, I think, was the price of this CPU, if I remember correctly. And nothing Intel had was able to match it in the consumer desktop space. So not until 10th gen, which came out in 2020, and I think the top end was a 10 core. The 10900K was a 10 core. So they still didn't have anything, right? So, like, they didn't really properly match it. But, you know, today, like, you know, you can easily obfuscate this part of Intel's branding. You can basically cross these out and call this 24 core in marketing. You can market it as a 24 core, a 16 core i7, and a 14 core i5. Versus what? A 6 core AMD, an 8 core, or maybe 12 core, maybe? Even the 12 core doesn't look as good, right? Even the 12 core doesn't look as good. And then versus the 16 core at the flagship. So this would be Intel. This would be AMD. Right? This is the problem. This is the problem that AMD's in, because you can easily obfuscate the results You can cross these the big core, little core out, or hide it from the consumer. Market these as a 24 core, 16 core, 14 core, and this on paper looks much better than this. That's the problem that AMD's in. Basically, Intel has flipped the table. They've changed the narrative. They've basically done what AMD did to them back in 2017. Where back when the Kaby Lake 7700X or the 7700X was Intel's quad-core, 8-thread i7, and that had to compete with a $329 Ryzen 7 1700. Right? So that was 8-core, 16-thread versus Intel's 4-core, 8-thread. So that's how AMD was able to change the rules of the game. Intel's basically doing the same thing to AMD. They're using their own, high core count strategy, and they're using it against them. And I think it's working out really well for them right now. So all things considered, not counting power consumption and noise. But the reality is these two in particular are really good. This one, not so much. This one, you can kind of ignore that one and pretend it doesn't exist. But yeah, these two are the good ones. And the funny thing is, most people that have been out of the loop and on a really, really old Intel i7, they probably don't care about the i5 because it's not an i7, and they're just going to think, oh, I'm just going to get an i7. And they'll be fine. So, and it's marketed as a 16 core, 24 thread. So, it looks really good in the public's eye. For the average Joe, it presents really well. So now let's talk about Nvidia's pricing. So, because there was a whole thing about like 4080, right? So let's look at RTX 3090 Ti. This is 1900 MSRP. You know what? I'm just gonna do the roundup. I'm just gonna call it like it is. Then there was the 3090. This is 1500. And I'm giving you guys MSRP. We're not going to go all the way down the stack because we don't really need to. But we're going to see, like, does Nvidia's prices make sense? These are the MSRP numbers. Now, obviously, these are not the prices that they are selling for today. Some of them are still selling more than they're supposed to. Most of them aren't. So this is 600, if I remember correctly. Or maybe it was 650. No, I think it was 600. Because this is 500. I'm just going off of memory. But I think I have a pretty good memory when it comes to this stuff. And then here is where I forget. So this one, I don't know. I think this one's 350. So I think that's it. I'm not going to go below the 3060. But these are the MSRPs, right? So now let's try to figure out what is the new stuff. So let's go down here. RTX 4090 is 1600. Then what do we have? We're going to skip that one. We're going to go to this one. RTX 4080 True. This one is 1200. Okay, so I was off by one. Okay. Okay. So, but you get the point, right? Like, look. Let's look. So this is going to launch for the price of the Ti. So that looks really weird. This is launching roughly similar to this. So here's the thing: can we say that the 4080 is bad, or let's look at the 4090? Can we say that the 4090 is bad in terms of the price? Well, when you compare it to its predecessor, it's $100 more. So, Nvidia might make the excuse of, oh, well, there's inflation. Oh, well, this was the cheap Samsung node. This is the expensive TSMC node. So we have to justify that $100 upcharge somehow. So I can see them making that from a financial argument. So do I think the 4090 is overpriced? No, I don't. Not really. Not if we're considering this as a relevant and valid price for a consumer GPU. But, you know, if we go further back and we look at the 20 series, then we can see where the shenanigans are coming into play. So, but is this overpriced? Yes, this is definitely overpriced because look at the MSRP of the 3080. I think those numbers don't lie. So there will be a 4080 Ti at some point, but I don't know what the 4080 Ti will be because this is already what is this? This is the 102. This is the 103. Then the fake one is this one. This, you know what I want to show you guys? This is going to be the 4070, but this was the fake 4080 12 gigabyte. Who knows what that will be priced at? Because that was supposed to be $900. So what are they going to do? Sell a 4070 for $900? How is that going to look? Well, let's look at this. Maybe it makes sense. Maybe this makes sense. 500 to 900 is a $400 increase. This is 700 to 1200. You know, that's a $500 increase. So this is actually a bigger price jump than this. So maybe they can actually get away with trying to price a 4070 for $900 while calling it a 4070. So I don't know. Obviously this and this look really, really bad when you compare what their predecessor's cost was, or their MSRP price was. That makes the 4090 look a lot better. $100 over versus, you know, 5 and 4. So just looking at this is like it's the worst one, strangely enough. And everybody was, you know, all the social media, all the tech YouTubers, everybody was all up in arms with their pitchforks saying the fake 4080 is a 4070. Nvidia's trying to charge you $900 for a 70 tier card. Well, I mean, look what they're doing. They're charging you $1,200 for an 80 series. Is it really that much worse? Is it really that much worse? Don't forget that the... Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so, okay. That's a good point. So Nisco brings up a good point. Like, we can kind of predict what the 4060 will cost just by looking at this. So, if this is 400 over, and this is 500 over, what is this going to be over? 300? 300 over? So this will be like, what, 600? Or 650? Or maybe 700. But I think that starts making it look close to this. So I don't know. I think maybe 600. The 50? I don't even remember what the 3050's price was. So I think we caught him, right? Like this is the one that smells the worst. This one smells really bad. But this is where we're at now. A 60 series card costs $600. A 60 series card costs more than a PS5. $100 more than a PS5 in 2022. 250 was MSRP. Okay, so that, yeah, I didn't know what it was, so I'll add that one. You know that there's actually a 3050 Ti, but it's only in the mobile. It's in laptops. So this one was what? You said 250? Okay. And this was like 330. Okay, so yeah, so that means this one will probably be 400. I'm guessing. Well, the thing is, they really usually at the low end, they really cut down the performance so much. So maybe 350, maybe 330 even. I don't know. You know, this could probably even be 330. I feel like they could do that and call this good value. Their only fallback could be you're getting more RAM now, which would make RAM value going up weird. I don't know. I mean, sort of. But the thing is, I feel like if they try to do that, that's a really weak argument because AMD's been giving you 16 gigabytes of memory since Radeon 7, which was in 2019. So I can't really buy that argument if Nvidia tries to play that game. I won't believe them for a second. So barely progress at the $200 mark. Tech barely progressed. I'm not sure what you mean by that. AMD gives you, yeah. Well, what do you mean, like Kevin? What do you mean by tech barely progressed at the 200? Oh yeah, okay, that's what you mean. I was looking at, I read that wrong. You're talking about like the low end, okay, 3050, yeah. Yeah, but the prices went up. The prices went up, but well, not really, right? Like the 250. I mean, did this ever really sell for 250 though? I feel like this always sold for like 300 plus. Intel Arc gives you 16 gigs. It's only 3. Yeah, I know, right? Like that. That's the reason why that's amazing value. I mean, let's look at AMD and Intel, right? Like Intel competes with. Where would Intel be here? Like, right here. Arc A770 and Arc A750. This is 16 gigabytes for 300. For roughly 350. We'll just say that. And this is like 8. For, what is it, 250? Was this one 250? Or is this 300? I don't know what the price of the 750 is. We're talking about how, well, we're talking about a lot of things on the CPU side. We're talking about all the problems with all the different product launches, like the melting power cables, the low volume, the driver problems, the high temps, high power, because all that stuff. Now we're kind of talking about the price of the GPU. 280. Okay. 280. Okay. So, yeah. I mean, this isn't even like, this is like what, down here? In terms of price, like this is like right here. This is crazy good value. This is like such good value. Look at that. Here, I'm just gonna put it next to the 40 series. So it just makes the 40 series look even worse. Look at this. 16 gigabytes for 350 versus, you know, I'm pretty sure this isn't gonna be 16 gigabytes, considering this one's gonna be 16 gigabytes. But I mean, if we bring up AMD, like then Nvidia looks even more stupid, because you're talking about the value for money. Like I don't know how to justify that. This was what? This was 1100. I'm gonna try to do the AMD ones. This one was 1000. 6800 XT was 650. Oh, this is the one I always forget, because this is the one that like you could never get because it was always scalped. I want to say this one was 600, or no, this was like 579. It was like 580. I think it was some weird number. And then there was the 6750. This one was 549, 550. This was 479, so 480. Then you had the 6600 XT for, okay, this is where I start forgetting. 380? 350? I think 350. And then this was, I have no idea. I don't know. These are the ones I don't know. And there was also like the 50, like the one that everybody hated because it was like a by 4 or by 8 memory bus or something. And then there's even like this one, which we won't even talk about that one. So 579, 58. Yeah, that's this one. But I don't know this stuff. Like the 600 ones are the ones I don't remember. Almost never sells, and it's all... Yeah, the same thing with the 3060 Ti. In fact, the 3080 never sells at MSRP either. Yeah, I don't know. If someone in the chat can tell me what the last two are, I don't even know if this is right, but I think all of these are right. I don't know about these. But this, like... You know what? We need to add the VRAM so people know, like, the value for money. This is 16 gigs. I'll just do 16 gigs. 16 gigs. Man, AMD, like, they're just killing it with the value. Even on the non-XT, it's 16 gigs. Then you've got 12, just like a 3080 Ti. 12, and then this is going to be 8. This is 8. And this is, I think, 4, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember. I think this is 4, but I could be wrong. But yeah, something like that. I'll have to go look at, like, Tech Power Up to find the MSRP. So 6600, the MSRP is $329. So 330. Oh yeah, there's also the mining card. The 6700 non-XT is a mining card. It was a mining card that Sapphire sold. It was a 10 gig card. Yeah, it was a weird card. And but the thing is, I don't even know what the official MSRP was, because that was supposed to be a mining card. So I don't really like to consider that one, because that, man, that just makes AMD's product stack. Actually, it should be down here. This is in the wrong spot. Oh, that's the Discord link. 6700, 10 gigabyte. I don't know what this price is, because the 6600 XT is like, what, 350? Yeah, I don't know what the MSRP is on that one. Because it's supposed to be a mining card that Sapphire was selling for a while. Let me find the 6600 XT. This one is... This one's... Okay, this one's actually 380. Oh, this is 380. Okay. So it's a $50 difference. So this one's probably like 400? The link is in the, it's in the video description, guys. The live stream description has the Discord link. $6,700. Yeah. I don't know. I don't really want to consider that one in the list, but let's see if there actually is a thing on Tech Power about it. Because it doesn't even show up, like... Searching through the site doesn't even show it. Like, it doesn't even show up. Like, hold on. 6,700. Okay, it does show up. It doesn't have an MSRP. Fantastic. Yeah, we can't consider it because it doesn't really have an actual price. I don't think it was supposed to be sold to the public. Like, that's why. It just seems kind of weird. It was a mining card, so... Yeah, this is kind of where it bottomed out, right? Like, this was like a $200 something card, and there was the 6,400. So, but anyway, like, let's just finish this up. What was the last one? The 65... The 6500 XT. This is the one that had, like, the by 8 memory, oh, the by 4 memory bus. So this will be terrible on a PCI Gen 3 interface. $200. Wow, that's like significantly cheaper than the other ones. Okay, so Kevin joined the server. So basically, this is it, right? So you got 16, you got a lot of 16 gigabyte options on Team Red. And you got 12 in the middle, and then 8 for like the what do you call this bracket? Like mainstream and then entry level. I guess, like, I typically call this enthusiast. This is high performance. This is like, what, upper mid tier, lower mid-tier, and then entry level. That's kind of the way I look at it. Because you can say the same thing with the Nvidia stuff. But, you know, like, what is Nvidia's memory? Like, this is 24. This is 24. This is 12. This is 10. Yes, I know there was a 12 gigabyte, but it came later. You couldn't buy it at launch. The card had been out for over a year, and there was all 10 gig in the beginning. And then there was, this was 8. 8. Okay, here, wait, this is 8. This was the retarded thing from Nvidia. Like, why, was this an 8 or was this a 6? I don't remember on the 3050. You guys can tell I never look at the low end stuff. 3050, 8 gig? It's 8 gig. I mean, that's what it shows up in the database. So, who had better value in terms of VRAM? Like, overall, in the range where people actually spend money, which is basically here. This is typically it. People typically don't buy the 3050 or the 500. They usually buy in here. So, this is stupid because it doesn't make sense. Why would you put 12 gigabytes on a 3060? Was there an 8 gigabyte 3060? There wasn't. That's so weird. It's like they were trying to sell this card to mining people. Like, it's like they were tailor-making this card for Ethereum mining by putting 12 gigabytes on it. Because this was the most energy efficient of the 30 series cards. Right? So, but look, where people typically spend money, usually people don't buy, like, people don't spend over $1,000 on a graphics card, which basically omits all of these from Nvidia and these from AMD, usually, historically, because this used to be like Titan price, and like nobody cared about this. Yeah. But this doesn't help in gaming, because the core on the card is not strong enough. So it comes off as unbalanced as a product. It just looks kind of dumb. And it also makes it very awkward to purchase this product right above it, because now you're spending $70 more for 4 less gigs of memory. Like, that just sounds so weird. It just looks odd, right? And then so that's weird. So if we look at this, so you got 8 gigs here versus 8 gigs there, so you kind of tie in the middle. But then when we look at the 70, you only have 8 on Nvidia versus 12 on AMD, which is interesting. And AMD's cheaper. You got 600 versus 550. Now, granted, this card came out way late, so it's kind of hard to even consider this one. So in reality, it's more like these two versus like all of this stuff right here from Nvidia. They could have put 16 of VRAM on a 256 bus on that. They could have, but they didn't, right? So obviously they don't do that because they want you to upgrade. So whereas here you're basically set. So longevity, obviously this card will outlive all of these by leaps and bounds. Now in terms of performance, I don't think it'll be able to keep up with this one. But here's what's gonna happen. This card will die as newer games come out, and it just can't keep up. So it will become core limited. Whereas this card will die where it becomes VRAM limited pretty quick at 1440p with newer games. So this one's core will last longer, but it will become irrelevant because its memory buffer is too small. This one will become irrelevant because the core is slower, so it'll become irrelevant because of the core, not because of the memory. So it's so funny how like both AMD and Nvidia, their products become obsolete for different reasons. You could just use low textures on any of them, though. So it'll still become irrelevant at some point because the VRAM just won't be good enough. Especially for 1440p. For 1080p, these cards are going to be strong for a very long time. Like, all these cards at 1080p, they're going to be... Like, okay, let me put it this way. If you're on a 1080p monitor, you should just completely ignore the 40 series entirely. Until the 4060, and then again, like, assuming this thing's gonna be like $500 plus, and if you're okay with upgrading to a $500 GPU to pair with a 1080p monitor, which to me sounds outrageous, I would never do that. Then then it's a thing, but I don't know, it just sounds really bad. So where does that leave RDNA 3? So I guess now we come to the topic of tomorrow. Wireframe. I ran to VRAM bottlenecks. Exactly. So I don't buy the whole, you can just turn low textures. Yeah, if you want your game to look like garbage, go ahead and run it on low. I mean, people will do that for games like PUBG because PUBG is just optimized like trash and just, I don't know. But, like, that's the thing. It's like, what do I want to play Cyberpunk 2077 on low textures? Why would I ever want to do that? So yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like a relevant. I mean, you can do it. I'm not saying you can't do it. It's not going to be a good experience. So it's so weird how the two different brands they become obsolete in different manner. Like, AMD almost never becomes VRAM limited, whereas Nvidia is far more likely to become VRAM limited. Case in point, 3080. 3080 is such a bad value because it's 10 gigs. 10 gigs on a $700 graphics card. Like, that's just not good. And this also looks pretty bad. This is like, what? $100 per gigabyte? $100 per gigabyte? This card is such a joke. Like, gross. And then there's this, which is good value, but, ray tracing. People always complain about ray tracing on AMD, but okay, there's like, what, a handful of games that you would actually play that have ray tracing. And then even then, the argument of, the same argument applies where it's like, use low texture. Okay, use low ray tracing. And you barely even notice the difference. Honestly, like, ray tracing on performance versus ray tracing ultra, there's very little visual difference, especially as you're, like, running through the game world. You barely really notice the difference. So the point is, we're not talking about on par, whether it's on par or not. We're talking about longevity. The discussion is about the longevity of the card, and obviously the VRAM is going to make the card last longer versus like something that's 12. Especially since these type of cards like this, and this. Look at the price. $1,000, $1,200. You're paying $200 more for 4 less gigs of RAM. And these cards are supposed to be paired up with no less than 1440p. Like, anyone who's pairing this or this with a 1080p monitor is doing it wrong. They're just straight up doing it wrong. I'm sorry, but they're doing it wrong. Because I can guarantee you the engineers that built the RTX 3080 Ti and the 6900 XT, they did not intend for the card to be paired up with a 1080p monitor. That's just not how it works. The same is true for like the 4090. The 4090 is not supposed to be paired up with a 1440p monitor. It's supposed to be 4K minimum. I mean, over like 5 years from now, will it make sense to pair it up with a 1440p? Yeah, maybe 5 years from now. But it's not like it's going to be terrible at 4K in 5 years. I don't know. That's a meme. 500 FPS is a meme. texture 10x more important than ray tracing? Yeah, I would agree with that. So, like I'm saying, so I would rather run the game with ultra textures and low ray tracing, or performance ray tracing and ultra textures, than low textures and ultra ray tracing. Yeah, well, COD players, maybe, but Counter-Strike... The thing is, Counter-Strike, they don't even really play it in 16:9 either. Like, Counter-Strike, they play it on, like, 4:3. Like, competitive CS isn't even played at 1080p. It's played at, like, that weird aspect ratio, like the old school 4:3 or that 5:4, like 1280 by 1024 resolution. And then at that point, none of this even matters, because if you do low texture and you're playing at 4:3 or 5:4, none of these cards up here are even relevant, because all of these can already do what you're saying. So, on low textures for like CSGO. Exactly. You don't need... Basically, what I'm saying is like what I just said. All these are irrelevant for low res. For that type of game. So yeah. .360 hertz. You know, honestly, once you're above like 120 hertz, like for example, I'm on 144 hertz. I really don't see... I've seen a 240 hertz panel. Like, I compared the Sony InZone 144 hertz 4K like side by side with a 240. I think it was an LG. I forget the model. It was like a 28-inch something. You know, it doesn't really look that much better. So, like for me, if I was buying a high-end display, I would want it to be... I would take something that's 144 hertz with HDR10 or HDR600 with the typical, you know, 1 millisecond graded gray IPS or whatever. And the wide... I'd take the wide color gamut and that stuff over like a 360 hertz TN any day. Yeah. Yeah. It depends on what you do. Like, man, anytime people start talking about, like, high FPS, I don't know, because there's still people out there that are using CRTs for that sort of thing. Like, for Counter-Strike. Because the CRT screen is 4:3 aspect ratio, and you don't have to deal with response time at all. It's not a thing with that older technology. So they're running it over the DVI, so it's like whatever, like DisplayPort to DVI. So I don't know, like I think for tomorrow though, like what do you guys think is gonna happen? Like in terms of AMD's RDNA 3, I think there's gonna be... I don't know what they're gonna call it. I think they're gonna call it... There's gonna be this. There's gonna be this. I don't know what else they're gonna announce. I don't even know if this is what they're gonna call them. If they do bring back XTX, that's like a throwback to their... like the way they were 20 years ago. What I'm more interested to see is what the specs are in terms of the display connectivity and the PCIe generation. Because AMD typically is the first to adopt the newer standards when it comes to PCI Express. 700 XT will be 1200, 700 XTX will be 1400. Where are you guys getting these numbers? Was this leaked? Oh no, you're just speculating? Yeah, so I'm more interested in the DisplayPort 2.1 and the PCI Gen 5. Because I'm thinking, like, these... If this is PCI Gen 5... Now, granted, it's probably not going to make that big of a difference. But the fact that it is actual Gen 5 you can't fault it for doing that. Like, that's not a bad thing. That's still a good thing. And then the DisplayPort 2.1 or 2.0, isn't it supposed to be 2.0? Is it really gonna be 2.1? That's interesting. If it's 2.1, like this, I don't know. This is kind of me guessing. And then do we know for a fact it's DisplayPort 2.1? If multi chiplets are what's going forward with multi-chip boards coming back. Oh, you mean the dual? That's a good... No, I don't think so. Not necessarily backspace, because you've got... because you're not doing crossfire, if that makes sense. So it's different. So what you're talking about is you're talking about when you have two dies on the same GPU. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about quad fire or crossfire and the SLI one that's like built in. Essentially, if you have two dies, you still have crossfire because you have an interconnect between them. Like this is the HD 7990 or the HD 6990. We'll just go with 7990. So this was a GPU from 2012, 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So you're talking about something like this. This is very different from what they're going to do with chiplets. Chiplets is not this. Chiplets is... It sounds similar, but it's not. So with chiplets, you're going to have your GPU. You're going to have the die for the actual graphics cores. You might have another one that's identical. And then you're going to have like a, what they call an infinity cache. Well, they used to call it the infinity cache on the RDNA 2. But now it's probably going to be the infinity fabric. This down here. And then up here, these two are like your this is like the die. It's kind of like the CCD on Ryzen, but it's gonna be the Radeon shaders, the shader chiplets, I guess. I don't know what they're called. We'll find out tomorrow probably. PCI Gen 5 NVMe SSD with one. Yeah, they're coming out this month. PCI Gen 5 is coming out this month. Asus Ares 2, Ares 2 was that. What was that? That was the man. What was that GPU? That was not a 7990. That was a Fury Pro Duo or a Radeon Pro Duo. I forgot what the Ares 2 was. Power Color had a Devil. It was like Power Color Red Devil something GPU also, which was a dual GPU and it was air cooled. Man, what was the dual? Was there like a dual Vega? No, there was a dual Fury. There was a dual Fury, right? No, Gen 5 is going to be for gamers. Gen 5 is going to usher in an era of things like direct storage and basically turning, like RAM disk is coming back. You're going to be able to basically stream textures in directly from the SSD into the VRAM and completely have to bypass holding things in the RAM. So it's, yeah, no, it's going to change things. Yeah, look at what Nisko's talking about. Microsoft Direct Storage. PCI Gen 5 is coming for gamers. Like, okay, the best example I can give you is the PlayStation 5. The PlayStation 5 makes use of PCI Gen 4 the way it's actually supposed to be used. Meaning the PlayStation 5 actually leverages the high throughput, the upper range of the Gen 4 speed on the SSD. Most games on PC today do not do that. Now, the easiest way I can kind of guide you into knowing if a game really is designed with an SSD in mind is if you look at the Steam page, the store page for a game on Steam, and if you look at the system requirements, usually at the bottom, if it says SSD recommended, that typically means that they're leveraging some form of optimal, they're trying to do something with streaming the textures off the SSD and caching it into the VRAM, as opposed to like loading it from the hard drive into the system memory and then having a copy from the system memory the texture data into the GPU, and then the CPU has to do all of that one by one, and that's where resizable bar comes into play, because it can speed that process up dramatically for Intel Arc specifically. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. So Gen 5 is only going to make the adoption of that technology happen even faster, because, like I said in a previous stream, when we're talking about PCI Gen 5, because it is so much faster, it makes it easier for the programmers for the game engine to not really have to worry about trying to optimize it too much, because they just set it and forget it, and the NVMe drive is so fast that it'll just take care of it, right? So yeah, PS5 is 7. Yeah, 7 is the max on the PCI Gen 4 specification. So because we're doubling that, think 14 for Gen 5. Now, it doesn't matter that it's only 5.5. That's still within the PCI Gen 4 specification, because the PCI Gen 3 specification for M.2 is only 3.5 gigabytes per second. When you're saying 5.5 gigabyte per second, you're still talking about a Gen 4 speed. Yeah, so it's still Gen 4. Right, yeah. No, yeah, Kevin, you're right. It's the width. It's not just the... You're talking... So you guys are talking about two different things. One of you is talking about burst. The other one's talking about throughput. It's like, there's a difference. So, have you ever noticed when you copy over a very large file, regardless whether you're using an SSD or an old hard drive, if it's a very long file transfer, at a certain point, the speed will drop dramatically down. That's because you have exceeded the buffer size on the storage medium that you're trying to copy it to. Yeah. So so when you're talking about the internal NVMe on the PS5, that's not a proper comparison, because that is a custom. First of all, there's a couple things there. Sony's using a custom controller that has that 12 channel, so it's a little bit different from a consumer SSD. So it's not really the same thing. But having said all of that, like, the Gen 5 SSD is just going to make a lot of that texture popping and those sort of things go away. 99% of Ep5 games are delayed this year. A lot will come in 2023 because they had to fix performance issues. Okay, the Series X is Gen 3. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Again, the controller on the actual integrated one is different. It's different. It's a custom solution. So it's not your run-of-the-mill consumer drive. Regardless whether you're talking about PS5 or Xbox Series X, the integrated storage, the NAND flash on the console is not the same. The way that works is not exactly the same as what you get on a typical M.2 drive. Like, the controller's different. Typically, there's more channels. It's a wider bus. It's more parallelized. Or, not paralyzed. Parallelized, or however you say that. It's parallelized. It's parallel workloads. It's not like all serial on those. the controller is able to do some kind of load balancing. I don't know much about the Xbox implementation, but yeah, the Sony one is definitely different from your typical run-of-the-mill SSD. Doesn't matter if we're talking about Gen 4 or whatever, PCI Gen. It doesn't matter. It's a completely different implementation. But it still adheres to the PCI Gen 4 specification in terms of the throughput and the burst. So, but the thing is, going back to the Radeon, so if this is the 7900 XT, typically the way it's going to be designed is it's going to have multiple chiplets. Just like Ryzen. Now, the thing, it's a GPU, so I don't know if it's going to be like 2 or 3 or 4, or however they want to do that. Like, that's a mystery to me at this point. But they could basically build blocks, then have like an actual interposer that connects all of it. So then this ends up being the die that gets soldered onto the actual video card, the actual card itself. You know, and then that's it. So, and then this would be like the PCIe slot down here. You know, that's like the tab right there. So anyway, and then you have your power connectors over here. So they have dual 8-pin, at least from the render, which is nice. I mean, honestly, I'm pretty sure AMD probably never intended to go with the 12-volt high power cable from the start. I think they always were going to do... I personally thought that AMD was going to go dual 8-pin plus a single 6-pin. So they would have like a 6-pin over here, in addition to the 2 8-pins. But from the render, at least, it looks like it's only a dual 8-pin. Now, maybe this one is the dual 8-pin, and this one is the dual 8-pin plus the single 6-pin or triple 8-pin, who knows? But we'll only know tomorrow, right? Like, I don't think there's been a lot of leaks in terms of how the power connectors work, other than the fact that Scott Herkelman said that they're not going to use the PCI 5.0 cable, like the actual power cable. So... Okay, so let's just Microsoft. No, I won't be able to stream it. But we will be doing a live stream talking about it afterwards. Microsoft Direct Storage API is not implemented yet for PC platform, but that is about to change. There are some games on PC and PS5. The PS5 version loads in about 3 seconds. PC version is like 20 seconds. Well, I can use Genshin Impact as an example. So Genshin Impact loads faster on the PS5 than it does on the PC. And this is like SSD versus SSD. And on the PS5, I've tested it on the internal SSD and the internal, like, the M.2 SSD. And it loads, in both cases, Genshin Impact on PS5 loads faster than on the PC. And that is with a Gen 4 SSD on the PC. AMD is probably going to pull an M1 Ultra. I mean, what do you mean like that? In terms of energy efficiency? I don't know. I mean, it's dual 8-pin from the render leaks, right? Let's look at the render leak real quick. It's actually not even the render leak. It's the official document. So let me bring that up. So this is the leak in terms of the reference cooler. I don't know if this is true. It probably is. It looks believable. The fact that you have a red PCB down here means that it's an engineering test sample. But, you know, like, just looking at it here, the bottom one down here is the new 7000 Radeon. The one up here is a 69... What is... Let me... Hold on. Let's see. What is this? Oh. This is a 6950 XT. I featured this card in my 13th gen Intel how to build a PC video. My 13th gen unboxing video has this very GPU in the video. I personally like the older design. I don't like the way this looks. This new design looks... It looks more like an AIB card. I don't know. It just looks very gamery. Whereas this one, the older design, looks more, you know, industrial. I like that it's just a straight, like, it's more rectangular. This one's got more, like, angled stuff here. I don't know. That doesn't look that good to me. The other thing, too, that I don't like about the newer card, I don't like how the Radeon logo looks. Why is it, like, curved so far down? It's almost like this GPU will look really good if it's vertically mounted. Like, on a vertical mount in a case, this will probably look really good. But in a typical, you know, horizontal, just plug it straight into the motherboard, this doesn't look that good. I mean, the good thing is that it looks like all the fins can easily exhaust the air. There's not a lot of obstruction here. Like, notice how on this one, the Radeon logo, technically that is obstructing some of the airflow. I mean, this thing here where the PCIe power connectors are, this is also sort of obstructing airflow. But, you know, the newer one looks like it's got better airflow capability. I just don't like the way that logo looks. They should have just angled that logo more like how the older one looks. So, unless they fixed it in the final design, maybe this is like an early... Yeah, this is definitely a debug board, because you can see all these pins up here. This is for debugging the cards. This is definitely a dev card. This is not an actual retail sample. No, it's just the way they did it to get the airflow through. I just don't like how that looks. I just think, like, personally, if this is really the way the shroud looks for the official reference card, I'm probably gonna buy a AIB. Like, I'm just saying, like, I just don't like the way it looks. I'm a big fan of how the 6000 series reference card looks, and that's why I've got one. But this one, no, I don't really like that. So I'm probably gonna go with like a Sapphire Pure or a Nitro Plus, or maybe an XFX, whatever they end up calling it. I hope they don't put USB-C on it. I really don't like the USB-C on the back of the 6000 series reference card. Please give me 3 DisplayPort and 1 HDMI. I don't want 2 DisplayPort, 1 HDMI, and 1 USB-C. I really don't like that USB-C port. It's annoying because when I am benchmarking GPUs, every time, like, if I'm doing, well, okay, honestly, if I'm benchmarking, it doesn't matter. But every time I swap out my GPUs, like, for instance, if I'm going to go from this GPU to ARC, or ARC to Nvidia, or whatever, it's a hassle because I use 3 monitors, and they're all DisplayPort, so it's like, every time I need to use the Radeon 6000 GPU, I have to change the DisplayPort cable on one of the monitors to a DisplayPort, or a USB-C to DisplayPort. It's super annoying. So I really, really hope that they give us 3 DisplayPorts and 1 HDMI instead of that annoying USB-C and then 2 DisplayPorts. But yeah, benchmarking doesn't matter because I'd be benchmarking on a single monitor. But I'm just saying, like, if I swap between my main, like, if I'm testing it in my main rig, and then if I swap to like an Nvidia GPU or to the Intel Arc GPU, it's such a hassle to have to undo the cable from the monitor, have to get behind the monitor. You know, it's annoying because I have like the wall right behind it, so and the monitors are all on a mount, so it's super annoying. So yeah, I don't like, I'm not a fan of USB-C to DisplayPort. But it looks like, so that was the Ryzen 7000 series event. So they're going to be in Las Vegas tomorrow. I'm pretty sure Steve's going to be there. Jay's already there. Paul's probably going to be there as well. So all like the YouTube guys, typical tech tubers, they're all going to be there. They've all flown out to Vegas for this event. So the preliminary specifications, if this is to be believed, you have the XTX. This is the one that's going to compete with the 4090. So it's got 48 work group processors. That's what this WGP stands for. Then you have 12,288 stream processors. That's a lot. That's a lot. Because look at what you had on the 6950. 5,120. So this is more than double that. So they're going for the big numbers, just like Nvidia, because the 4090 from Nvidia was very surprising. They were real subtle about that. And then it just kind of came out the doors, and it just kind of basically reset all expectations of what 4K high refresh gaming is like. Let me see, 96, so the Infinity Cache is 96. What's interesting is it's less. So you had 128, and now you're getting 96. Unless this is like per chiplet. If this is per chiplet, this thing will run really, really good. If this is not per chiplet, if this is total, that means that they've definitely gone with a completely different architecture. And then 384-bit versus 256. So this is a lot like Nvidia, right? Because Nvidia, this is a, where is the bus? 384. What was 3090 Ti? 384. Okay, so this is kind of like Nvidia then. That'll be interesting. So that's big. Okay, the memory clock, this about 20 gigs. That means it's even faster than the 18 that was on the 950, because this one was 16 on the 900. Way more memory bandwidth. That's an insane number. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, if it's really PCI 5, you know, that's interesting. Because AMD will be ahead of Nvidia in terms of the interface technology. If they really are going to be Gen 5, they're going to be first to Gen 5. And I think the rumors were that they're going to be DisplayPort 2.1. So that's going to be interesting. So yeah, that's really cool. If they really pull that off. If this is true, then that's amazing. This is the reason AMD is going Gen 5? What's the reason? Oh, direct storage? If so, then that's good. I don't know. I mean, okay, so let's kind of speculate on the price then. Because I think that's the only thing left we can speculate on at this point. We kind of know the specs, if those specs are true. There will also be a 7800 XT, though. Well, let's not talk about the 600, because I don't think we're going to be seeing that for like a year. So, this one... This might be 1100 or 1200, or maybe 1200. What if they do? Okay, what if they do the Nvidia thing? What if they do 1200? Because look, what did Nvidia do? 1600 over 1500. They did a $100 upcharge. Well, what if AMD does 1200 over 1100, or they could just do 1100. They could price it the same as the outgoing new flagship, but in reality it's $100 over the original flagship from 2 years ago. So what if they do that? What if they pull the Nvidia, they do the old like $100 upcharge over the last generation? Like what if they do that? If they do this, and this thing is close to 4090, which means it beats the 4080, which is going to be priced at $1,200, then this is going to constantly be out of stock. You'll never be able to find one of these in stock because scalpers are just constantly buy it up. That's a sad reality about it. Well, I don't know, because maybe, well, they didn't leave AMD alone either. I mean, they scalped Nvidia 30 series for like 2 years, but they were doing the same thing with AMD. The problem with AMD wasn't so much the scalping, it was the lack of supply. Because AMD wasn't buying enough capacity from TSMC for their GPUs. They were putting it all into Ryzen and into servers and data center enterprise and that sort of thing. So they had a different kind of problem on the GPU side compared to Nvidia, whereas Nvidia was constantly getting scalped. I'm gonna say probably 1100. I could be wrong. They might price it at 1200. I'm gonna go ahead and say this, or 1200. It could be either or. Honestly, it could be either one. And I think the price would be justified either way. If they do 1300, how are they price fixing? How are they price fixing, considering Nvidia's 1600 and 1200? You're just saying if they do 13, 14, like right because they're right in between this. Oh, because it's gonna be better than the 4080. It would fit right in between them. I guess that's what you're saying. I don't know. I think if they do 1100, this is gonna be a bestseller, and you're never gonna find it. So good luck trying to get one of these if it's 1100. They could just do 1100, and the AIBs will sell it for 1200. They could do that too. 6900 XT was 1000, not 1100. 1100 is 6950 XT. If they want to compete, so I honestly think that this is what you can expect. That's what I think it's gonna be. One of those two. It could even be higher, but I don't think it'll be over 1400. I'll give you guys a range. How about that? We'll just do a range. Like, let me just delete all this stuff right here. I'm gonna say the range is gonna be, the low will be 1100. This is the cheapest it will be. The high will be 1400. I don't think they'll no, I think they're gonna go for like no higher than 1300. But in reality, if this is the MSRP, you can bet on AIB partner cards costing close to this. I mean, look at the Asus Strix 4090. That's $2,000. What's to stop Asus from trying to charge 1300 for a flagship on the AMD side? So this is the range. I'm pretty sure that's gonna be it. AIBs are TSM water-cooled versions already. Yeah, exactly. So this is going to be, 1300, maybe even 1400 or 1350. So, but this is kind of the average range at launch that you can expect. And now for this one, the range on this, well, considering the previous one was 1000, it might just end up being 1000 to 1200. So who knows? So I'm going to say that's the range. I won't really say that it's less than 1000 because the previous generation was 1000. Now, the reason why I can see this being a reality is because if we remember, AMD did not increase prices from Zen 3 to Zen 4. They stayed exactly the same. In fact, the 7950X is cheaper than the 5950X was at launch. So I can see them doing this. They basically hold the line. This is the same price as the outgoing model, so this one. And then we've got 1000 to match the same exact launch price of the previous 6900 XT. Therefore, AMD can get away with saying we never raised prices, whereas Nvidia did raise prices. It's right here. Oh, and this one's $1,200. Oh, and by the way, that was originally $700. So the math doesn't lie. I can kind of see AMD pulling the we didn't raise prices, whereas the competition massively. Well, this isn't a massive raise, but this is definitely a massive raise. Over $700. We're talking about $500 markup on the Nvidia side. So that is not going to be attractive at all, at least in my book. Now, a ton of people are still going to buy it because, you know, they don't know any better. So they're just going to keep on driving that Nvidia stock price up. So whatever. Anyway, so the 7800 XT, this is probably going to be you know, honestly, this might be January. I don't know. I don't know if this is going to launch this year. Honestly, I have no idea. But if anything is, if we're going to go by like price of this, 700. Well, let's just say 7 to 800. I don't really see this one being that much more, and then this one would be 580 to 650. Yeah, I think that's going to be January at the earliest. Because I think the rumor is that these will launch in December. Like, they're going to announce them tomorrow, but you won't be able to buy them until next month. So it's going to be waiting for a while. Basically, Nvidia will be able to have a small window of opportunity to, you know, basically milk their buyers, typical people who just buy Nvidia because they don't bother to look at what AMD has. They don't even consider it. So, or they just don't even know about it. So they're just gonna throw 1,200 on this or whatever, or buy one off of eBay for like 1,600. They'll just buy off of a scalper for the cost of this. They'll pay for this. You know, that's a thing that actually happens. It's sad, but you know, people make very dumb decisions sometimes, and you can't really stop them. You know, people are just gonna do what they do. You wouldn't, yeah. All right, Nisco. Yeah, we're gonna end the stream soon too, anyway. But there's not a whole lot more to discuss here. I kind of think this is the expectation that I have in my mind. So we'll see if how close I am in terms of if I'm at least in the ballpark of my estimate versus, oh, I'm way off, or maybe it ends up being way more expensive, or maybe they try to undercut massively by pricing it, you know, like sub 1,000 for the flagship, and then they just try to steal market share, basically do the Intel thing, like undercut the competition. But it kind of depends, because I think if AMD has true, like a true DLSS type implementation, they can get away with charging more. If they don't, then they'll just charge it, you know, like this. So if they're just going to rely on FSR, or just, you know, call out something like FSR 3.0, then they'll probably just price it, you know, closer to 1,100. If they have a true DLSS equivalent using machine learning, and they have essentially something kind of like tensor cores, then they're going to price it higher, more like 1,300. So I'm just kind of setting expectations, because in my mind, that's what makes sense economically, and in terms of being able to get buy-in from the public. In terms of what you would get Linus to say good things about your product, like if you have a true machine learning technology, and if you price your product above 1,300, Linus will give you positive reviews. But if you don't, and if you're saying I have FSR 3.0, then Linus will just kind of grade you on that, and then you're just gonna have to price it at, like, you know, no higher than like 1,200. So I kind of think that's what's gonna happen. And I'm pretty sure we'll see. I think that's what's going to happen. It seems realistic. In terms of the inflation, all that stuff, I think that's what they're gonna do. What do you expect FSR 3 to be, frame generation? I think it will be, so this is where it goes back to what I was just saying. So it's like, if they have a true like a true machine learning based upscaling algorithm, they probably would want to name it something completely different from FSR. So I don't know what they would call it. You know, Radeon R, you know, like some acronym that's kind of like DLSS. So deep learning super sampling, Radeon learn, like some marketing term. They'll come up with some new name, right? I don't know what they'll call it. Radeon RDLS, Radeon Deep Learning Sampling, or something, you know, like that's what it would end up being. And they would price it higher if they have that. And if the ray tracing performance is also above RTX 30 series and just below of RTX 40 series, then again, they're going to price it higher. If it's more in line with RTX 30 series ray tracing, and or they don't have a machine learning upscaling technology, then it's probably going to be FSR 3, and FSR 3 is just going to be a newer iteration of FSR 2. Frame generation, I don't think so. I don't think they're going to do that with FSR. That would be something completely different. It would just be a newer iteration of FSR 2. And if they do that, then you can expect it to be priced lower. So it'd be like this. Because essentially, at that point, they're trying to sell you on much improved rasterization performance, which is not a bad thing at the end of the day, because when it comes down to it, rasterization is still king. Rasterization is still more valued than ray tracing, upscaling, any of those kind of gimmicky features that may or may not exist in a game's settings or implementation. So at the end of the day, rasterization is king. So as long as they have that, you know, they can still justify the over $1,000 pricing. FSR 3 will be like DLSS 2. I think if they're going to make a DLSS, like a true deep learning type thing, they probably want to call it something else. They're probably not going to call it FSR 3 at all. They'll have a completely different name for it. Because FSR works on all GPUs. It works on AMD's old stuff. It works on GeForce cards. It works on Intel Arc. You know, it's not an exclusive technology. What I think AMD needs to do is they need to stop making things that work on Nvidia's graphics cards. They need to start becoming more selfish and make things that work only on their products. So that they have, because that way they have exclusivity. You know, Nvidia, a lot of people like to say Nvidia is the bad guy. They make all these proprietary things. Oh, look at them, they're so bad, they're evil. Yet, who is people still buying? More than 2/3 of the market is still buying Nvidia when they're the apparently evil bad guys, right? So I think AMD needs to do the same thing. I think AMD needs to make more proprietary technology for themselves and not let it work on GeForce. That's what I think they need to do. Get more exclusivity, not more like, you know, interoperability, if that makes sense. That way you have stuff that differentiates yourself from the competition. Think about it like this. When Nvidia has all this stuff that only works on Nvidia, plus, you know, all their other stuff that they can just use that was from AMD, like, for example, FSR, FreeSync, you know, all that stuff that AMD implemented, but it also works on GeForce, like, that just makes Nvidia look better, because it's like, oh, we have all of our exclusive features, oh, but by the way, we also are compatible with what the competition made. So, you know, that just makes them look so much better when it comes to a value equation. And that's the reason why I think AMD kind of loses out. Because AMD seems to be, they're playing the good guy way too much. I think AMD needs to start becoming the bad guy. They need to start making things that are exclusive to Radeon and not work with GeForce. That's the sad reality, because I think that's how you get respect and you get buy-in from the public. As much as people like to hate on Nvidia and bash them, the fact that people still go and buy them, even the people that are criticizing them, says a lot. I think that speaks for itself. So I think AMD needs to take that approach. Intel has XESS using AI and working like FSR, being GPU agnostic. FSR 3 could stay just like that. Yeah, but see, I just think that FSR, the name already carries the connotation of something that is similar to DLSS, but it is not the same implementation. Meaning FSR does not use AI machine learning acceleration. FSR is a temporal-based upscaling mechanism. It is not anything that AI has accelerated, if that makes sense. It's a completely different thing. In the long run, all these proprietary AI upscales are going to get replaced by whatever Epic will... I mean, yeah, but again, not all games are made in Unreal Engine. You have so many more engines out there. So, yeah, Epic might just displace DLSS and FSR, but that's just Epic. And that isn't to say that you can't run a game made in UE5 that doesn't also carry a DLSS 3.0 or 2.0 or FSR2 or FSR3 implementation. Right? So there's way more engines out there than just UE5. Crytek, RE Engine, you know, all the like Vulkan stuff, all the indie things, typically most of the Japanese developers, they have their own engines. Elden Ring's on its own engine that's still derivative of Dark Souls, and that's still derivative of like the Bloodborne engine from the PS4. And then you've got you know, like Capcom does their own thing, the RE engine, all the Resident Evil games, Monster Hunter World, Devil May Cry, they're not UE at all. And then there's like Crytek, so that's going to be Cyberpunk, Witcher 3, which there's going to be another Witcher game. You know, none of that stuff's using Unreal Engine. So, and then of course like Call of Duty, Frostbite engine. You know, there's like a lot of them out there. And then if we're talking Square Enix has Crystal, like Luminous Studio engine, the Crystal Tools engine, the derivative of that's FF14. You know, like FF16's using its own thing. That's not UE at all. So, like, there's a lot of stuff out there that's not just UE. And then, of course, there's also Unity. Case in point, the game that I was just streaming just now. In fact, it's still open. Genshin Impact. So this game right here. Let's bring this up real quick. So, Genshin Impact. This game scales really well. In fact, there was an article of this game running at 13K resolution on an RTX 4090. And in fact, I think they were, now granted they're only running at 30 FPS on the 4090, but this game looks pretty good, and it scales really well. Like, it scales really well. And guess what engine this game is made in? This game is made in Unity. This game is made in Unity. Genshin Impact is made using Unity, of all things. And it scales extremely well and performs very well. You can run this thing on a potato, and you can run it on a super high-end system like what I'm doing, and still get excellent performance at 4K. Max settings. So this game, I think, is the poster child of Unity games. This is probably like the best Unity game I've ever played. Qualcomm, discrete GPUs to pair with their Windows ARM laptops. So, yeah, that will be interesting to see. It's always cool to look at like the other types of technology out there, especially in the mobile space. But yeah, because most of the time, like enthusiasts, the enthusiast crowd, like the people who always talk about like different technology, all this stuff, we usually tend to only like get tunnel vision on like the latest and greatest of the high-end stuff, the Halo products. But yeah, it's interesting to see what they do. Like what Apple's doing with the M1, what Qualcomm's doing. A lot of that stuff is really interesting as well. ARM wants to ban them from using custom. Yeah, but that's, I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff there with that. Yeah, I know. I don't... honestly, I said this in a previous stream. Like, when it comes to DLSS, I think that mobile platforms are where DLSS makes the most sense. And the funny thing is, I feel like the RTX 4090 is only proving my point. Because the RTX 4090 basically performs so well at 4K with no DLSS that even when you turn on DLSS, it's kind of pointless. so where I really think DLSS 2 and DLSS 3 make the most sense is on like the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch, can you imagine Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which is probably going to be Game of the Year for the or best JRPG, or I guess best RPG of the year. I'm pretty sure Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is going to win that award at the Game Awards. That game really, really needs DLSS 2. Like, it's seriously... Like, the Switch... And Nintendo... I'm just going to go out on a limb here and just say... I wouldn't be surprised that right now, this very second, as we're talking about this, Nintendo is working on the Switch 2, and the Switch 2 is going to be able to use DLSS 2.0 technology, if not 3.0 technology. Now, I think it's going to be 2.0, but man, if they could leverage DLSS 3.0 frame generation on the Switch 2 to be able to do 60 FPS on mobile gaming while conserving battery life, that's the sort of thing that they really, really need. Did I start a quest without realizing it? I don't even know what happened there. Yeah. Yeah, the DLSS thing, though, that really needs to go to mobility. Because I think that's where it's really going to shine. More so than anywhere else. Can I go inside this building? They don't let me go inside the building? Yeah, I do think, though, that... Oh, I can go inside, okay. Oh, everybody left. Well, okay, well, we'll see. I mean, I kind of think that we kind of covered everything that I needed to talk about on the stream today. I didn't want to let this one go where we didn't cover RDNA 3 before the announcement. So we're going to be talking about RDNA later on this week in terms of the post-announcement. So once we know the actual specs, the actual price, then we'll... Let me bring back up there. Yeah, so once we know kind of like where it lies in terms of the price, how it'll be competitive with GeForce, I think that's going to be the big thing, right? Because honestly, like originally I did kind of want one of these, but because I wanted to cover it on the channel, but unfortunately 13th gen happened, and I ended up buying a 13900K instead. So, where I really screwed up was I ended up buying the 13900K, a Z790 motherboard, and more DDR5 memory. All of that together was still less money than a 4090. So that was what removed the budget for a 4090. So if I can recover in the next like 2 months financially, in terms of I spent all that money for the channel to talk about this and to compare it with like the Ryzen 7950X. Yeah, I'm not disappointed in it. I am disappointed in the temperature. Like I said up here, so at the beginning of the stream, just to summarize for those that are watching now and they weren't watching earlier on, this is what I talked about initially. Basically what I said was there was a lot of product launches that happened within the last like like a month and a half. We had Ryzen, so basically we got Ryzen AM5. It was well received, although I think the main criticism from reviewers was that it was expensive. But if you boil it down, like the only thing that's expensive about it is the fact that you have to buy new memory. But the thing is, like, I think people weren't fair when it came to reviewing they weren't fair to Ryzen when they reviewed 13th gen, because nobody mentioned the same negative drawback. And that's because you can pair it up with DDR4. But the thing is, like, if you pair this up with DDR4, you're on a pretty ghetto motherboard. Like, it's not nearly as good if you're on a DDR board or DDR4 board. We talked about this on a previous stream. And you're giving up performance because the DDR5, Intel on DDR5 is still better than Intel on DDR4. So it's like if you're pairing it up with DDR4, you're basically running it at like a 12th gen part in terms of its performance. So you're just leaving performance on the table. So basically what I'm saying is if you're pairing up 13th gen with DDR4, it's going to be slower than Ryzen 7000 because it's going to be like a 12th gen Intel. And 12th gen Intel is slower than Ryzen in most cases. So, except in some games. But again, some games, not all games. So, I just don't think that was a... Like, people didn't criticize 13th gen for being expensive. But that's because the CPUs, on average, were cheaper than the AMD Ryzen CPUs at launch. That's the main thing. Like, a lot of people kept saying that the platform cost is so expensive. No, it's not, because if you're trying to get a equivalent high-end Z790 motherboard, you're gonna pay the same amount of money as you would if you were buying an AM5. And if you want the best performance on Intel, you still have to buy DDR5. You still have to buy the exact same memory. So, you know, it ends up being a wash. The main difference is like 13th gen, like 13900K is like $50 less than the 7950X, but it still ends up being $100 more than the 7900X. So, you know, it ends up being a wash in my mind. Where 13th gen is good is at the lower end. So the i5 is good, the i7 is good. Relative to the i9, which is just kind of bad value. It's like I said here, too hot, too high power. Like the power consumption is terrible, the high temps, the fan noise. Like it's just really annoying to deal with. It's super hard to keep cool. You basically have to enforce power limits if you're running it on air cooling, and it just ends up being unstable. I mean, I have BSODs, which is why I don't stream with it. I don't currently use this CPU when I'm doing my live streams. I'm still using the Ryzen 7950X for all the live streams. And that's because of stability problems on 13th gen. I'm waiting for Gigabyte to send me a beta BIOS that's supposed to fix some of that. So I don't know. That's why I haven't really done much content on 13th gen since launch. 4090, I wanted one, but not now. It's impossible to get. It's scalped constantly. There was the whole power cable fiasco. That's still a thing. The nice thing about the new Radeon cards is you don't need to buy a new power supply because you don't need that 12-volt high power connector. And, you know, obviously you don't want to use the adapter. unless you have a 300 volt rated adapter that comes with the 4090. But it seems like it's a gamble. You're playing the lottery to see if you get a 150 or a 300, and that's kind of annoying. So, you know, this is kind of a no-go for me, at least for now. And then ARC was pretty good. Like ARC, I got lucky, I got one, but you know, a lot of people couldn't get one. So the low volume was a big negative. And then the driver, obviously, it's not terrible, but it's not great. I'll put it that way. But yeah, that's basically where we're at. The only remaining launch for the year is AMD's Radeon card, so the RDNA 3. And then, of course, the 4080. The 4080 is coming out later this month. I think it's like in 2 weeks from now or something. So, but that's probably going to get scalped instantly. So, you know, good luck trying to get one of those. And that's pretty much it. So, these are the problems that I compiled for all the major recent product launches. And that's basically it. You can find Reddit threads on various different, like if you go look up like ASRock's Reddit, you're gonna run into this. Same thing if you look it up on like, you know, AMD's Reddit page will talk about this in some posts. So that's a serious issue. The only way to avoid this issue is basically disable XMP. You turn off XMP or Expo and you don't have any problems. So if you're okay running stock 4800 DDR5 on the new AM5 CPUs, it's smooth sailing, no problems. That's the only issue, is the whole like Expo needs a firmware update and that sort of thing. And then on Nvidia, we already talked about this. I don't need to say much more on that. There was a problem. Jay's 2 Cents did a video about it, but you know, this is a thing that was fixed, but it was a problem. But I think most people are more concerned about the cables melting at this point. But the way to avoid this is buy a new power supply. So it's like you just spent $1,600 plus on a GPU. Oh, by the way, now you have to buy a $300 power supply on top of that. So that's just the only way to avoid the problem. And then 13th gen, don't need to say much more there. I'm probably going to do a video on the 13900K. Like, I want to cover power limiting. I already covered power limiting on AMD. I'll probably do the same thing for Intel in a future video. And then, of course, on ARC, I will be making more videos pertaining to XESS. And then I will probably do something with AV1, although I'm not exactly sure how to showcase that. Other than, like, recording something with AV1, then putting it in a YouTube video, and then, like, recording something with QuickSync, and then showcasing that, and then you do, like, a side-by-side comparison or something. Am I going to take the stream down? I really like to watch something. No, it's gonna stay up. It'll stay up. All my live streams are all on the channel. Like it'll go up after we're done being live. So, yeah, you can definitely check it out. I mean, most of it's just kind of like the first part of it is talking about the problems. The second part of it was the kind of the CPU discussion, like between AMD and Intel, like the current situation. And then the third part of it was the graphics card discussion, where we were kind of talking about like expectations for, you know, the upcoming AMD CPU or GPUs, how they're different from like a dual GPU of the past, and then also kind of like the price projections, like where we kind of think these are going to end up being priced relative to the previous generation, relative to the 30 series, and then of course the 40 series from Nvidia. So, and ARC being very good value if you can find one. So with that being said, I think that's going to be it for the stream. We will be back next time. I'm not sure what I'm going to be talking about, other than the most immediate topic we'll be talking about is the post announcement from AMD. So expect to see another live stream about that. And we might be doing more Star Ocean, the Divine Force footage or gameplay. And other than that, there'll be a video later on the channel covering more content on Intel Arc. I may do something with Arc plus Intel, so basically pairing it up with an Intel CPU, because I know a lot of people have been curious about that. Well, I don't really think there'll be that big of a difference, but I will test it out. If I am going to pair it up with my old Alder Lake, I do need to get a new CPU cooler because I don't have one. So my 12700K is literally just sitting in storage. And I'm using my Ryzen 5800X as the test rig. And that's just because I don't have a cooler that fits 12th gen. I don't have more than one. And the only cooler I have is on the 13900K. So that's going to be it for the stream. Thanks, everybody, for watching. I really appreciate it. All the kind of the interaction in the chat. We got a pretty good discussion overall regarding various different topics about like the multi-chiplets, the price expectation, the you know, not a whole lot on the Intel side, but there was a lot of talk about ARC early on. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Once again, thanks for watching, and we'll be back next time with more discussions on the newly announced AMD Radeon RDNA 3 GPUs, and whether or not those will be good value, and if you should keep those on the short list if you're looking at getting a new GPU in the near future, at least on the ultra high-end or enthusiast class. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here. Once again, thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys next time. Thanks.